Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, it being 4 o'clock, this is the West Basin Municipal Water District Engineering Operations Committee meeting and a special meeting of the Board of Directors. And we'll begin with the call to order and determination of quorum. So, Mr. General Manager, if you could call roll.
I will call roll. Committee Chair Alvarez, starting with yourself. Director Alvarez.
Here.
Committee Member Director Williams.
Here.
Committee Alternate President Deere.
Here.
Director, Vice President Director Houston.
Here.
And Director Gray.
Here.
Okay, seems that we have the entire board present. Committee Chair.
Excellent. Do we have any comments from anyone, any members of the public or otherwise?
Okay, and looking at the attendance online, it appears we have no one with their hand raised to indicate a public comment. And to my knowledge, I don't believe that there was a registration in advance for public comment. Is that accurate? Thank you, Eric.
We have no public comment.
Well, I would like to make a maybe a bit of a comment, if I may.
You're more than welcome.
Okay, thank you, Director Alvarez. So I just want to say happy Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month to everyone here who is in attendance, and to my staff here at West Basin. Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month is an annual celebration that recognizes the historical and cultural contributions of individuals and groups of Asian and Pacific Islander descent to the United States. The AAPI umbrella term includes cultures from the entire Asian continent, including East, Southeast, and South Asia, and the Pacific Islands of Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia. As of 2019, there were about 22.9 million people of Asian or Pacific Islander descent in the United States. According to the Pew Research, AAPI people are a diverse and growing population that make up about 7% of the total U.S. population. AAPI Heritage Month is celebrated during this month of May from the 1st through the 31st. So with that, I just want to let that be kind of the start to a wonderful month of celebrations. And I hope that we are able to bring forward some additional recognition for AAPI throughout the month, and in particular, our board meeting at the end of the month. So with that, I will also say I'm glad to have our staff present in the room today. Just coincidentally, we also have lifted the mask mandate. So we're free to not don facial coverings. I do have an exceptional situation by which I will, don a mask today. But for those who may feel at liberty to, not don a mask, they are free to do so. Let's see, do I have anything? I think I'll limit my comments to that. So thank you for giving me that liberty, Director Alvarez.
Not a problem. It's a pleasure. And I'm glad to hear that we have now tried to normalize as much as possible and lifted the mask mandate. All good. Okay, next item up is presentations. Do we have any?
We have no presentations today, Director Alvarez.
Okay, no presentation. So the next item up is our agenda. And so under action calendar, I'm going to move a couple of items around. And I'm going to take items 6A and 6B from the information calendar, and that would be the capital improvement program and the West Basin headquarters relocation update, and move those to the action calendar. And they will be the first items we are going to take up.
Okay, thank you for that adjustment to the agenda. And so with that being stated, we'll start with action item 6A, Capital Improvement Program Fiscal Year 2022-23 budget. And this particular item is being brought forward as a matter of interacting with the board in our previous CIP presentation during the budgetary workshop. And in that particular workshop, there were several items that were identified as needing additional follow-up and discussion. And so therefore, this item was prepared to facilitate that interaction. So with that said, I will hand it over to my friend and colleague, Barkev Mesalarian, to take us away under that under that action item.
Okay, and Mr. General Manager, if I could add a couple of comments before we get going. I know that the presentation is quite lengthy. If I have it correctly, probably we have, I don't know, almost 100 slides.
We don't intend to go over 100 slides, sir.
I was going to say, we do not need to go over 100 slides.
And that is not the intent.
I would like that the presentation be rather focused and that we talk about existing projects first, and then that are right now CIP projects, and then we proceed from there. But first and foremost, let's talk about what we have in front of us today that's going to and these are projects that are basically either under construction or will be beginning construction in the next year.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Dr. Alvarez, and good afternoon, members of the board, members of the public. As our general manager mentioned, this item is mainly a response to the April 20th special workshop that we had about the CIP program. Some good questions were asked, and we felt the need to follow up on that and attempt to answer some of the questions and the requests that were made on April 20th. So if we can go to the presentation on packet page, it starts off on packet page 78. And I'll try to run through these as fast as I can, but feel free to stop me at any time. Next slide. You'll see what we have in the presentation today. As the general manager mentioned, we don't necessarily plan on going through all of the slides. There are several slides on there that are for the open discussion at the end if necessary. But we want to start off with a quick recap of what was discussed on April 20th CIP workshop. We want to then go ahead and answer some of the questions. There was a question about what are the different phases within the next fiscal year, the different phases of the projects that is. What are the committed funds and the non-committed funds for those projects? What is the amount of refinery funding that we have secured to date? Requests to look at the schedule of member replacements. What are the breakdown of IT projects? And there was also a request made to maybe have a discussion about those, what we call Table C projects, those projects that we have considered in the past. But could be unlikely to be implemented mainly due to cost. So with that said, on the next page, I will start off with the recap. Yes, Greg?
I was just going to say, if it's, in deference to the request of our committee chair, would it be possible to go straight to the third item on the agenda, which would be the committed versus non-committed? And I'm thinking that gets right into the preference that the committee chair had expressed.
If that's the wish, I can certainly do that.
Okay.
All right. So let's fast forward to package page 88, or 89, I should say. Okay, so in the last workshop, we talked about we broke down the proposed capital improvement projects, capital improvement program projects into different categories. And the categories were, here are the projects that are currently in the bid construction phase. Then here are the projects that are currently in design, and then planning, and then what we called early planning as well. And there was another last category that was the annual costs for replacements and refurbishments of capital assets. So this first one was a slide that we shared, was the projects that are currently in bidding and construction. And we talked about really the major item in this one is a project that is currently under construction, the Phase 2 expansion project, which holds a significant amount of the budget that's allocated, that is proposed for next fiscal year, and a few other projects. So on these slides, on these next slides, what we want to demonstrate is there was a question about what are the committed funds versus the non-committed funds in the next fiscal year for these projects. And what we've done is we prepared an illustration, a graphical illustration of that, and we're happy to go through those. First batch of projects that we're going to go through are these that you see before you, the bidding and construction phase projects. So if we can go to the next slide on packet page 90. The graphical representation here, let me go through the colors. What you see here are some bar lines that are in blue and some are in purple. The dollar amount in blue represents the committed funds. What we mean by committed, we made an award, whether it's for consulting services or for construction services for that particular project. And those are represented by the blue columns or blue bars, if you will. And the ones that are in gray are the non-committed ones. So for example, on the first project, the JMM Phase 2 expansion project, because we've awarded a construction contract, we are here saying that that $16.5 million that we're projecting to expend the next fiscal year, that's a committed fund. That's a committed expenditure. Same goes to the second one, distribution, cathodic protection, that is in the latter stage of construction. Some of that construction is going to spill over to the next fiscal year, and therefore there is an award for that project, and that's why those are in blue as well. The last one, same thing with the pumping facilities at the Edwards Little facility to support the Title 22 filters. The fourth one you see over here is one that we did put out to bid. We brought it to E&O last month, and we were instructed to go back and ask for to pursue refinery funding for that project. So therefore, we haven't awarded the construction for that particular project, and that's why it's showing up in gray here. It is an uncommitted dollar expenditure for next fiscal year. We haven't committed to expending those dollars. If you'd like, I can go through these projects a little bit and mention a little bit about them. The Inglewood Basketball Entertainment Center, there's little funds here, some left over from this year. Those would be reimbursed by the developer. The Brewer Desalter, there's an item today to award construction. So those $176,000 that you see as uncommitted, if we were to approve it today at the next board meeting, the construction service award, those would move into the committed column. And then same thing with the last one that you see here, the MFRO, those are valves that are determined to be necessary to improve our clean in place membrane activities. There are 7 valves that we're considering purchasing, and the purchase hasn't been made yet. Therefore, it's in the uncommitted column. Any questions about the graph itself? Because we're going to see this graph in the next few slides moving forward.
Director Williams, do you have any questions about
No, thank you.
understanding the graph? Any board members have any questions? I don't have any questions. I have a comment. I think I'm the one that asked for what have we budgeted and what haven't we budgeted. And I appreciate that. But as we move forward, the whole intent of this is so that we know what CIPs are really committed to and budgeted versus what CIPs are out there in a big mix of CIPs, of which there's a lot here. And they're really non-committed projects, and they're just identified as potential projects. But I appreciate this because it does give us an idea of where we're spending money or where we're about to spend money. I do have another comment with respect to the retaining wall, which we talked about at the last meeting. And that project, if it comes back at all, needs to come back as 100% funded by the Torrance Refinery. Otherwise, don't ever bring it back.
Any other comments?
And that's moving forward to the board that way. Do not bring that back at all.
Director Alvarez, just for clarification, for we're going to put in the recommendation to the board at the board meeting. Do you want that comment in there for the board to consider? Your
Put that
comments?
in there, but this is, we're going to go through this and we're going to come down with a list of projects that we're going to recommend, and that is what the recommendation would be for the board to consider as part of the budget.
So
So
we're
So it's
finding,
going to be a very fixed list of projects we're going to end the day at.
just from the instruction here, the refinery says, we're not funding this project. We don't, despite that, we don't bring this back even if we think that it's necessary ourselves.
You have a design, and you were given instructions, go work it out with the Torrance Refinery.
Okay.
So those were the instructions that were left at the last time we met and discussed this. I'm not quite sure what's left to be understood about that.
right. If I may, I was just going to say that at the committee level, it's a recommendation, and then the full board would weigh in at the actual board meeting. So just for clarification of the recommendation or what will be coming to the board, are you asking staff to include that with regards to the retaining wall project, that it needs to be funded 100% by the Torrance Refinery or not to bring it back? Is that the comment that you'd like us to include? Okay, thank you.
Okay, if we can turn into the next packet page 91. These are the projects that are currently in the design phase. A lot of these projects, some of these projects, the design is anticipated to be complete this fiscal year in the next couple of months. Some we anticipate are going to spill over to, the design is going to spill over onto the next fiscal year. And so on the next page, on page 92, we can see just that. So you can see some blue bars, like the PV recycled water pipeline. Some of that design phase dollars are going to spill over to next year. And then we'll see, the board has approved this project, so we would go through construction bidding, and we'll come back with a construction award recommendation for that project. As you can see, there are a few others out of the 10 projects that are here. There's 3 of them that are, the design is going to be completed in the next couple of months in this fiscal year. So they have a zero committed dollars to them moving into the next fiscal year. And then there's one over here, the Nash Street lateral is also one that we are currently pursuing an agreement with the developer to recover those costs. So that's why that's an uncommitted column as well.
So that particular project in the Nash Street lateral, that is a project that is being requested by a developer and will be 100% funded by the developer.
Correct.
Who is that?
Those are the chargers are going to build a training facility in El Segundo on Nash Street. Any other questions on this one? Comments?
What is the TRWRP 93 MCC2 replacement?
If you recall, a few months back, we had a fire with one of our MCCs, and we went in and replaced some parts. There was an interruption. When we did the work, we did the inspection of all that work of the fire and that happened. Recommended that we replace the second MCC, and that's what this one is for. There's two MCC cabinets over there.
Right, so when there was a fire, we replaced one MCC.
We did.
And now we're going to replace the other one just because there was a fire in one.
Because we can get staff into there. Uzi, would you like to?
Yeah, it was actually assessed at the time, even by our flash specialists and safety, and it's the same age, had some of the same wear issues. So the goal is to this time replace it before it catches on fire.
Okay. Total cost of replacement of this was only $195,000.
I think it says 146.
It's 146 there.
It says total project cost, $195,000.
Oh, on the previous page.
$194,540.
Yes, correct. Yes, that includes the little bit of design work that we would need for that. Yeah.
On this, so on the chlorine, I'm sorry, the end-metal filter rehab and replacement project,
10073.
yeah, 10073.
Those are the rehabilitation of the filter basins that is part of the Title 22 production stream. We've so far rehabbed 3 of them. There's total of 14, and we're looking at rehabbing the rest of it so we can maintain compliance. The compliance point is just after the filters, and some of them are
They're all over.
Yeah.
So on that one, if we defer that for a year, what would happen?
There's certainly some risk of not meeting the compliance point, especially in the summer, and especially the type of water quality that we are seeing in our influent these days. We can use as much redundancy as possible in the basins because we're seeing the need to switch them out and clean them up more these days. I don't know if there's anything additional to that.
Just another precautionary thing. So if I have one transformer here and one transformer there, they're both 30 years old. That one exploded today. I replaced that one. You would probably tell me I should replace that one too.
Well, Director Alvarez, I mean, with all due respect, perhaps we could focus on the
well, I'm asking the question, what, because it doesn't seem that this could probably be deferred for a year. And the answer that I'm getting is that it would be a good idea. And so it's always a good idea to do things. But the question is, can it be deferred?
I didn't say it was a good idea. I'm recommending proceeding with this project. Wendell and Uzi, would you like to add
Yeah,
more?
just to add in here, earlier this year, we went into and we separated the 3 filters that we did prior. And that was simply because we had failure of the under drain system, and we lost the median and went into the chlorine contact basin. And so the under drain system, when we examined it, more than 2/3 of it was filled with median, and the wells have separated the channels. And so we actually went back into the design, because before we were going to do some spot replacements, and determined that we needed to replace the complete under drains of the system because it was in a state of near failure. And so what would happen is that we can have a catastrophic failure where the median is pumped or goes into the chlorine contact basin, which makes that ineffective. And I believe operations would have a hard time with the compliance, given the water quality issues that we've been having over the last year.
Yeah, I was just going to add, because it does sound maybe crazy to say, well, this one needs replaced, so we automatically will. But just to be clear, we anywhere I've worked, if we have a failure or disaster somewhere, we immediately take that as knowledge to then check on the others to learn from. So when this last event occurred, we did do an analysis of it, have it inspected. We do have reports on that. There are plenty of things that have gone wrong that we don't automatically replace anything else. We try to just learn from that and to inspect our others. And I think that would apply with some of the filters, or even in some of our processing. So I just wanted to make sure it was clear that we didn't just automatically say, let's do this.
And I also add, this is Susanna, we have 14 filters altogether, 4 of which all the converted filters are not in operable conditions. And we have 1 to 2 on the 1 through 10 filters are also out of commissions due to fail under drain. In order to meet peak flow, we're at this point, we're not able to. So we defer one of the filter, number 4, not to do the sort of the short-term Band-Aid repair last year, because we anticipate this project to be going forward. So this is a kind of critical repair that we need to address, because we just don't know when the next one, another one will be failing, and we have to put another filter to be offline, and we would not be able to meet the flow as well as compliance. Thank you.
Okay. But you could operate that plant for another year without replacing.
As you heard, we will have trouble meeting peak demand this summer with current conditions that we have.
And we do not know when another filter under drain will be failing with the same failure mode. So as a part of the asset management practice, this is what we set out to do. And we already deferred one of the filters to be repaired this last year. So we are really tight in terms of meeting water productions at this point.
To answer your question directly, we do not recommend waiting a year.
Just an additionally, doing the inspection of the system, there were some structural defects that were found. So part of this cost is to remedy the structural defects that were found, and determine that the tank had no longer, at least one wall in one of the tanks had no longer had any ability to resist any kind of seismic activity. We have a catastrophic blowout of one side of tank number 7, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so let's move on to another project. The Torrance Refinery nitrified product water tank rehab.
That's a rehab of the nitrified product water tank that we have at the Sunlight plant. We performed a condition assessment that basically told us whether, when we perform these condition assessments, we perform condition assessment every so years, and it basically tells us whether it's still good or whether we need to do some rehab work or whether we need to replace the whole thing altogether. So a condition assessment was performed on this one. We've reported to the board on several occasions about some of those findings. We forwarded the report to the board members as well, and the recommendation was to do some rehab work on the nitrified tank. It will be tough because it will have some interruption on the refinery. We'll be coordinating these with them. But is there anything other than that to add, Wendell?
Yeah, in this case, this is the preventive maintenance. I believe the assessment showed that the roof system was corroded, as well as some of the interior columns, as well as the beams that need to support. And so essentially this renovation is about dewatering the tank and providing a coating that would extend the useful life of the asset, 5-10 years down the road. If it's not done at this juncture, the facility will continue to rust, and the repair cost may increase.
Okay, but it's probably one that can wait another year or two.
We do not recommend waiting another year or two, or this one either.
Okay. Chevron nitrified product water tank rehab.
Pretty much the
Same question.
Pretty much the same explanation, but for a different satellite plant. Performed a condition assessment for that one and came up with recommendations, and we're following through on that.
And again, this could not wait another year or two.
In this particular case, there's a scheduled shutdown, and we're attempting to take care of it, doing that shutdown in the first quarter of next year. And the refinery is also participating, and we're in talks with the refinery to participate in the cost of this project.
So they're going to participate to the tune of what amount? 10%, 50%?
They, at this particular time, I don't know what their contribution would be, but they've asked about the total cost of the project so that they can budget for the project in their next financial year.
Well, do we have a contractual agreement that says they have to participate to some point? And what would that point be?
This project is not in the list of capital contribution projects or approved CIP projects, but they're willing to entertain knowing the condition of the tank and the ability to do some preventive maintenance on the tank and extend the tank life. So we're in preliminary talks with the refinery on this.
And to answer your question directly, we don't have an agreement for it.
Okay, maybe let's talk about the barrier basin pump station rehab.
Director,
Yes, sir.
I can't hear you.
I'm not even wearing my mask today.
Nevertheless, you're not, your voice is not carrying over here.
Okay, I will speak more loudly. It's just going to endear me more to everyone.
Hey. You got seniority here, man.
Okay. The barrier basin and pump station
Okay,
rehab. Can you hear me?
Were you the person who spoke last? That was you?
So I spoke and then I heard something.
I heard you say something, but
Anyways, what I said, my question goes to, this is to project number 10085, the barrier basin and pump station rehabilitation project.
This was a project that originally, there was a compliance element to it that made us look into project. What we did before we dive into any type of engineering is do a condition assessment of some of the facilities, that is the basin, the pumping facilities that pump advanced treated water through the barrier system. We performed a condition assessment and there were recommendations, several recommendations made to rehab the system. We did, after looking through the consult recommendations, we opted to not do all of them. In fact, we phased it out, and the expenditures you see here are just for the first phase of it, which I believe involves, Wendell, can you remind me?
The first phase of the project is to address the source of the non-compliant issue. There was a delamination of a coating inside the actual basin, and the first phase of this project is to address that particular issue. The project itself, wouldn't be a stranded asset, no matter what type of water that's being produced. I believe we would continue to provide water for the barrier, and this is the last step of the barrier basin as it pumps out into the system.
We have our engineering supervisor, Joel, here. If there's any more specific questions regarding the project.
Just, Wendell, when you said that it's a compliance driven, there's delamination of the coating. So the coating is delaminated. Did that get repaired?
It hasn't been addressed yet. So this first phase would start to address the delamination.
So are we in compliance or we're out of compliance?
We are meeting compliance on water quality. There isn't
So
compliance.
there's no immediate urgency about a compliance issue.
The coating would continue to delaminate and continue to discharge microfibers into the distribution system.
The pumps. I think that's the concern is the degradation and what that does eventually equate to in water quality. But there are no current water quality exceedances. There's a question, of course, about PFAS and whatnot, but there are no current violations in the barrier product water.
Can I correct that the compliance issue that led to this project is the MFI compliance, and we have in the past going toward to about that 2 ppm limit, and we have gone past that. So as part of a proactive task, we are looking into, and that's the reason why we need this project to ensure that we're not going to go past that MFI 2 ppm limit. So if you have any more questions, I can answer.
Just so that I understand, the compliance issue is all related to the delamination of the coating in the basin.
Correct, the concern, yeah, those exceedances in addition to the concrete, the delamination, and then the degradation of the concrete, which then can affect pH and everything else. It's quite sensitive for our permit.
So how big an area are we talking about that the delaminations occurred over?
Director Alvarez, would you like us to prepare a presentation about the whole project and provide some details?
I'd rather ask questions because then we're gonna be here all night and I live to know this is already gonna be
Well,
long.
some of us will be here all night, but not all of us.
And I really want to get through this meeting.
Well, that's why I'm asking you, would you like us to come back and kind of tackle a particular project? And
No, because we have to make some decisions and we have to move on. And so hopefully you have answers that are succinct enough and can
you got it.
can just get to the heart of the question.
You got it.
Okay? So it is a concrete basin. It's got a coating on it. Some of the coating's delaminated. And it would be a good idea to get that area that's been delaminated corrected so that there's no continued degradation of the concrete.
Correct.
Okay.
I would defer to the engineers on the degree of degradation and how much of the concrete is compromised. I don't know that answer.
We have Joel, our engineering.
Joel, would you like to add?
Sure. So we do have two basins here. We have a former contact basin that's been turned into an intermediate storage basin. That one is the one that was coated, and practically all of the coating has delaminated on that one. And then there's also the pump station basin, which is not coated, and that one has showed some degradation too. And I'm not speaking for Uzi or Susanna here, but my understanding is that MFI index, a point of compliance here on the water quality, that has been trending up, and that is why we initially did this investigation. So we are trying to catch this before it does cross the line into non-compliance. And the initial dollars here are for design. This is something that we would not be in construction at the beginning of next year. This is something where next year we are looking to do the design for this work and implementing the actual construction the following year, or bleeding a little bit into the end of next fiscal year.
Okay. So because you're talking now about only the design, so the design here is really preparing specifications for coating the concrete. Is that all we're talking about, or we're talking about beyond just specifications for concrete coating?
As Barkev mentioned, we had a condition assessment completed. Out of that condition assessment, the engineer said there was $8 million worth of work needed to do on the system, on just the basins and the pump station, due to things aging out within the next 10 years. And they wanted to do this design now because they thought it would take that long to implement all of these fixes. We phased that out, and the first initial phases do include this delamination and repair of the concrete surfaces, but it also includes design for motor control, MCCs, electrical distribution, and some VFDs. So this $295,000 does include electrical design as well as structural design.
I want to make sure that we're on the same project. We're still talking about the barrier basin and pump station project, right?
That's correct. There are two basins. And,
so we went from a compliance issue that had to do with delamination, and now you're telling me that it also includes design for the MCCs and other items.
the initial driver was the compliance issue. That driver caused us to do a full condition assessment where we identified additional needs for rehabilitation.
Okay, but again, the question is that needed now? Can it be done 2 years from now?
The construction could be done 2 years from now. We would like to have the design ready to implement this in case that MFI index creeps up even higher, and we would need to execute the project sooner rather than later.
Okay. Then let's talk about the disinfectant tertiary product pumps and VFD rehabilitation.
Joel, you want to take this one too, please?
Sure. So this project.
Minute, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I can barely hear you. And what it sounds like is that there's a competition here between staff and you.
I am asking questions and
Yeah, but it
I'm getting
sounds,
answers that
but it's more like, are you sure you know what you're doing? You know, I mean, then we have to go to the manager, because we hired the manager to give us the expertise on what needs to be done here. If you're going to challenge everything that comes before him or before us, I don't know who to believe. Do I accept the words coming from staff, or do I wait for your comments? So this doesn't look good. So I want to hear from the general manager. Each time you challenge his staff, I want to hear his words. Who are we going to whose recommendation are we going to take? Because before we can vote on something, we have to have a recommendation. And if the recommendation comes from his staff and you challenge everything that they do, then there's something's wrong here. You know, and I'm at a disadvantage because I don't have the kind of background that you have where you can go tit for tat with staff. I can't, and I don't want to. So, Mr. General Manager, before these things come before us, maybe this should be vetted by you before you bring this before us, because the questions that are being asked are like, those should be done before they come before us in the committee, so that we can ask you, because I'm going to ask you, how do you feel about this before I can vote? So it doesn't sound good. It doesn't look good. I'm sorry.
No, Director Williams, that's very much on point, and I appreciate those comments. From my point of view, part of my frustration has been that a lot of these projects that we're vetting and that we're going to commit to finance are projects that are not well defined, at least in terms of the information that's been provided to the board, or at least to this board member, in terms of why do we really need to do this project. And yes, I do question some of them, and have spent a lot of time at the plant looking at the facilities, etc., and trying to understand where we're going to be going and what we have available in terms of finances and positioning ourselves for the future as opposed to looking backwards in the past. So a lot of my questions today, and will be subsequent questions at future board meetings here regarding these projects, has to do with how critical are these projects. We've already gone through a couple of exercises and where projects have been brought to us, and everything has been put in the position of this is required, it's needed now, it's an emergency, and yet by the time the project gets done, you obviously question, was it really an emergency? Because if it was a true emergency, the project would be completed. And we went through a small example of that a month ago here, where a project was brought to us back in September. It was needed to be done at the time. I questioned it to myself at the time, but I said, it's fine, it's not that much money. That would be done in 6 months. 6 months had passed, they brought it back, and that project will not be completed for another couple of 3 months. And I have other examples like that. So I do have some significant issues with the veracity of the information that's presented to me, and therefore I do question it. And I question some of the answers that I'm hearing.
Okay.
Okay? So if we're talking about concrete and a concrete basin, that concrete will over time erode and corrode. It tends to take an awful long time. Is it better to have a coating on concrete? Probably. Concrete doesn't necessarily present that big of an issue. It tends to be fairly inert unless you bring in certain types of chemicals that are going to attack the concrete. So, and if that's the case, usually that application tends to have a coating on it. And that was my question. So the critical issue is the coating. And then there's other things that are being done, and we're doing all these other things to preserve facilities that we may not necessarily need, or right now have an opportunity to really think about where we want to invest. And if they can wait, in my opinion, and I'd like to have that clarification, then we should know that they can wait.
I'd like to maybe take a moment to answer the conversation, if I may. Committee Chair. Okay, so the spirit of this presentation was with the interest of providing an answer to the question of, what are the projects that we have committed costs to? And I think the team here has done a fine job at, illustrating that in a manner that I think answers the question. It seems that today's conversation has a broader interest of maybe, vetting the veracity of the proposals in addition to maybe getting after the commitments that were asked for in the last meeting. I appreciate Director Williams' comment to the extent that I agree we need to internally with staff provide a recommendation to the board. We have a list of projects that have been included in budget proposals to date. We've heard concerns about what really needs to be included in, the budget going for this next fiscal year. And internally, my conversations with my engineering manager has been to identify those projects that absolutely need to go forward and those which we can wait on. We haven't concluded those discussions as of yet, and I did not anticipate today to be a public airing of those discussions. And so I would actually tend to agree with what Director Williams has indicated insofar as being able to conclude, those internal discussions with my engineering manager and to be able to come back with what we think are those critical projects and those that perhaps, allows for us to carry a little bit more risk than maybe some are comfortable with, but perhaps in a thoughtful manner. I will say this, I think that the comments and the questions that you've raised are instructive in terms of, the kind of elements of the evaluation that we need to go through internally to make sure that we're bringing forward, the best set of projects. So I think that to that end, I appreciate, the comments and the questions that have been raised, by yourself today. But, I also would like to say that perhaps we can, continue the conversation within the spirit of responding to the questions that were raised in the previous CIP presentation. Perhaps allow for us to continue the internal discussions that have begun a few weeks ago.
That's fine. I'd like to add one last set of comments as to why I am asking these questions in the fashion that I am. I read the documents that were sent to me, and when I read them, I understand. I can see all of the explanations that are provided, etc. But the bottom line, there's a fiscal impact. And it says the proposed CIP budget is going to be $57 million. And I look at that budget and I'm going, I'm not quite sure that all of those projects are necessary or have been vetted by this committee or any other committee. Notwithstanding that for the last year, at least that I've been on this board, and I have not been on the newest board member and only been on this board for whatever, 16, 18 months now that I've been on the board. We have asked, I have asked about explanations of the CIP. And we've gone through a whole series of meetings. And every meeting is like, okay, they'll do better next time. But as of today, and for all the previous meetings, and I apologize because this isn't your burden, the burden you're assuming, but you haven't been here. We keep going over all these projects without ever truly defining, here's absolutely what we have to do and trying to move forward. And our budget is not well defined in terms of here's a line item for what the projects are, where the money is, and how we're going to budget. And if you go back to the last meeting of the board when we had the workshop on the long-term fiscal plan, I did ask, can we at least break down what the pay-go is versus the debt financing? Because in that pay-go debt financing, you have a big dollar amount, but the pay-go is really the only money that we have available. And then the rest of it is debt financing, and we're going to be taking on debt. And for some projects that may or may not be needed for the next 25 years, and then we have stranded assets. And I am trying to understand that, and I believe that this board needs to understand that. And it is a very difficult concept to understand. And we have wasted 1.5 years, in my opinion, and it is very frustrating for me and the amount of time I keep putting into this.
So thank you for that added perspective, Chair Alvarez.
I want to be able to make a decision based on what's best for the board, for the team, you might say. But I don't want to make it a decision based on competition between our technical staff and a very astute, very well-rounded director, because that does not look good, because we are not, no matter how much knowledge and experience that we have in the field, we didn't get elected to make decisions on this board based on that, because in the final analysis, anybody can become a director. You know, you can, all you need is to be 18 years of age and a registered voter, and you can get on this board. Of course, you have to get someone to vote for you, a lot of someone's, but that's what happens. So the expertise that we hang our hats on is what comes from our staff. You guys know a whole bunch more than I know, or the board knows. We put our trust in you, and it has to come through the general manager. Unless we're going to have at these committee meetings that staff, you put your cards on the table, and then us board members will put ours out there and say, who's giving the best advice? Because all of this stuff is opinion, right? Because we're all professionals. If you're a professional, people pay you for your professional advice. They don't pay you for anything else other than your professional opinion. And we have some staff here that's very well qualified. And we have a director here who's probably one of the smartest guys that I know in this business, but We don't need to have a competition, if you know what I mean. So I would hope that the next time we get together, that we don't have to ask those kind of questions that we're asking today. And so, Mr. GM, you're gonna have to give up a whole lot of sleep so that you can get up to speed on the kinds of questions that Director Alvarez is concerned about with all of these projects. Because everyone has an opinion. And we can have an opinion on how these projects should run and which ones we should do first, or if we should do them at all. And I'm listening to my colleague here, and I value his opinion.
As do I.
So, but at the same time, I value yours, but I was elected to value yours. Because you're our general manager. You are the guy that we pay for that technical advice. Desi's is free. But yet I'm
That is a true statement.
we've known each other for many years.
And clearly, you know, the explanations that are being provided by staff are very thoughtful and science-based, based on observations. And so I think they've been very responsive, you know, to the questions that have been raised. Maybe there's a professional difference of opinion, but clearly there's been a rigor by which, you know, these investigations have progressed.
I thank you,
Director
Gray.
Yeah, I'm trying to say something.
Director Gray, go ahead.
It almost sounds like there's a meeting just between the two or three folks there. I know that we're on the phone, and I think we're hindered by the fact that we really can't see each other, but I've been kind of in and out of the call, so I apologize for that. I've had other things to do, as you all know. We're all busy, but I kind of heard some of it. But this is a committee meeting, and sometimes I think that we may not remember that, and it's a committee meeting for the full board. It's not just a committee meeting for the chair or for one member. It's for the committee, the board members, to hear what staff is presenting. And yes, we have an opportunity to ask questions, but normally, you know, we wait until the presentation is done and we pose questions. Now, I know Director Alvarez has a lot of expertise in public works projects, as well as former President Williams, and I respect both of their expertise and them as people, but also we hired a general manager who we believe, and I continue to believe, excuse me, that he's very capable of providing this board with the information we need to make good decisions, because at the end of the day, the majority of the board is what makes a decision about any project or any program and anything that becomes policy. And certainly I have the highest respect for our staff there. They've been there for a long time, and excuse me, they've diligently worked to provide, I believe, this board with adequate information based on science and based on their expertise. So I would encourage any chair of any committee to hear our staff out, and certainly our general manager is in charge of staff, and he's the person we look to. I think we should hear them out, and we should be informed, and the only way we can be informed is to hear what our general manager and staff has to say. And if there is a lot of questions that any board member has, perhaps those questions can be asked offline, and more clarity is presented, is given to that board member, so that the committee meetings can move more smoothly, because we can get bogged down with one or two board members asking a lot of questions. They may be very good questions, but they may require a lot of time. And I don't think that's an efficient way of using committee time for any committee, for any board member or for any board committee. So I encourage anyone who has a lot of questions about whether it's capital projects, about whatever issue, that you meet with the general manager, get those questions answered as much as we can, so that when we do have committee meetings, we can move more smoothly, and other board members have an opportunity to ask questions, and staff has an opportunity to present information that may be a little bit different based on those questions asked before it's presented to the committee. But anyway, that's, I think you have the kind of the essence of what I'm trying to say today. But I think meetings need to be a little more efficient, and staff needs to have an opportunity to present. And I think board members should look at the way that those questions are presented to our general manager. Thank you. Excuse my voice today. It's more hoarse than ever. So, but thank you for listening.
Thank you, Director Gray. Appreciate your comment. I understand what you said and what Director Williams has said. I also would like to address the issue, though, of just trying to gather information in order to make recommendations. And as board members, and I'll be speaking for myself, I do want to be well informed, and have spent a lot of time reading a lot of material and informing myself about the facilities in the district, and trying to determine what I think the direction that I would like to follow. Now, I understand that that is only my opinion, and at the end of the day, I can only argue and promote what I would like to do, and at some point need to have other people either come around or not. But in order to do that, I think it's very important to have information, and information in a fashion that is simple and understood, and not presented in such a way as that everybody just kind of gets overwhelmed by it. And that is what I'm trying to clarify. I have no issues with anyone asking a lot of questions. I think that part of being elected to a board, whether you bring any type of background, is to ask questions in order to provide direction and policy. At the end of the day, anything that the district does doesn't reflect on staff. It reflects on the board. So if things go well, things go bad, you spend money well, you spend money bad, you can't go back and say it's staff. The answer is the board facilitated those actions. And if the board's going to do that, at least this particular board member, I want to know why I'm doing it. And if I have questions about it, and I think that it's not a wise decision for me to recommend, then I want to be so informed, and I want to make sure that that gets out. That process isn't always the prettiest process in the world, but we are a public agency. We're responsible to the public, and these discussions should be held out in the public.
Director Everest, Chair Everest, just one last comment I have to make, if you don't mind.
No, not at all.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate what you said, but I just want to reemphasize, I think all the board members have the same feeling as you do. You are, not that it makes a difference that you're the newest on the board, but we have certainly been due diligent, I think, in terms of our responsibility as board members. So I guess my point is that we all are concerned about making sure we make the right decision, but we have to have the information. And if it's just one board member that asks questions, which may take a lot of time, it limits the ability, I think, of other board members to participate and engage, because we all have that concern. We all want to make good decisions, but we all have to have that opportunity. And if If not, that it ends up being a very long meetings, and sometimes people are not able to continue to be involved in those meetings. So I'm saying we need to balance it to give everybody an opportunity to ask questions. That's all I'm saying. We all have the same commitment as you, that we all want to, and I think Director Williams said it best, we want to make the best decision for West Basin. And in order to do that, we have to hear the information that's given by our general manager and staff. And at the end of the day, we ask questions, but we have to have the opportunity to engage in conversation, all of us. And so I just want to reemphasize, we all, I think, feel the same way that you do. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and I welcome other board members to ask questions. I think the more questions that are asked, the better all of us would be. So to that extent, I've always said, is there any other questions from the board and the board members? And the more questions that are asked do make meetings longer, but everybody should ask as many questions as they need to ask in order to be satisfied that they have the information that they need. So if I've ever cut off anybody from asking questions, I apologize for that. That's never been my intent. I think more questions should be asked, not less.
Within the time that's allotted for the meeting. Look at the clock there.
You try to work within the time frame, or you try to address the questions that people have. Probably the latter is the more important thing to accomplish.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just want to chime in because I think on both sides some good points have been made all the way around, and it's a little bit difficult because the meeting gets belabored long in its own way. But at the same time, the way I look at it is, we are, of course, elected in our roles. We have responsibility to make those decisions based on the staff input, but also our own personal experience, our own outside counsel, let alone also our colleagues. So, we are sometimes pulled in multiple directions. But I also would say that I agree with what you said too, is that, we really are here to listen and to ask questions and to understand the complexities of what staff is asking us to approve. And so as far as I'm concerned, I know that these meetings sometimes can take longer than people like or expect, but that's our job. I mean, that's part of what we're here for. So, and there is a point where sometimes we can't always be there. I do have to leave today at 6 o'clock. I already told the chair before the meeting I can only stay so long. But under any normal circumstance, you all know that I would be present the whole time. And back to this, so I guess what I'm trying to say, we are trying to balance a lot of interest here, and staff, we're listening, we're being, we're trying to be respectful, but ultimately, I think Director Alvarez made a very good point a few minutes ago, and that was the fact that, when these votes get taken, that's where it goes, and then it moves on, and you could look at the past history of the district and probably find that there were a number of areas where decisions were probably not the best for the district. So here we are in the midst of this current budget and budget cycle in this calendar year. So we just got a lot of things on our plate that, we haven't even had time to rescope what's going on with this agency, as we just got a new general manager. I know we're working on that separately, but we're also in the midst of a budget cycle. So we're kind of caught in a big bind here. I'm just, in my personal opinion, being frank. And we keep getting pulled back into what are we trying to, approve and not approve and move forward. And there's no good answers at this moment to me. So, I would like us to figure out if we can cull the list to a point and say, okay, here's what the priorities are going to be going into at least the next fiscal year, which I know that's part of the budget talks. Because separately, we've got to have this, workshop or what have you, where the board can work with general manager and have an understanding of what are the priorities of this district. Because I keep feeling like we're putting all these projects on the table, we're being asked to approve things, and yet, what's the significance? Is it 2 years or 4 years out? So on and so forth. So again, I'm just, being blunt that, I'm confused with it too. I think there's nothing wrong with asking good questions. I want to listen to what staff's perspective is, of course, but at the same time, we at the end of the day, the directors have to be the ones that make responsibilities and take the vote and are authorizing the funds, the spending of the money on behalf of the residents of this district. So you have to understand there's a lot of weight on our shoulders too. So anyways, I just wanted to say that's really all I've got to say at this moment. But by the way, I've never been one to say I need to rush this meeting. I will not do that. If I need to leave, I'll leave, or we can work around another schedule. But I realize that I'm elected to this office. I take on that responsibility. I look at my packets. I call the general manager with questions, and that's what I do. So, I take it really important. And so I don't mind at all that there's good, strong questions being asked. We need to be able to justify for all of us what we're doing for the residents. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I'd like to,
Go ahead, Director.
that I didn't mean to imply that I wanted the meeting to go quickly. I mean, you can sit and ask questions, great questions, all night long, and all of us can do that. But you have a gavel for a meeting for a purpose, and the time is very important. I don't know any meeting that runs without a time, with a clock on it. So that's why some questions you have 3 minutes, or you have 1 minute to ask the question, and then you have 3 minutes to respond. I mean, we're in this business. So I just wanted to be clear that I too believe that all of the good questions should be asked. But every question that's asked doesn't really need to be asked. It could be handled in an offline situation. But I'm here that we should get the right questions asked, and the right answers, but it's the way you ask the question that can be an issue. So that's all I have to say for now. Time is running out.
Well, we've actually had a very nice discussion, believe it or not. I think that a lot of things were said that probably needed to be said, and gives everybody a little better perspective of how things are perceived by individual board members. Ultimately, there are a lot of questions that need to be asked. Sometimes people are motivated to run for a board because of things that they've seen and observed, and they want to make a change. And to make a change is a very difficult thing to achieve. It does require upsetting the apple cart, if you will, in order to get to that point. So I think that we're experiencing some of that, and that we will continue to experience some of that. How successful that change will be, hard to tell.
I agree.
Okay. So with that, since we're plus into this meeting, hour and 20 minutes into this meeting, let's try to get through the rest of the agenda. and I will go back to trying to finish where we were. But I'm not going to refrain from asking questions, and I'm not going to ask anyone else to refrain from asking questions. So if there are questions that any board member has, then they should be feel free to ask the questions.
See, now I take exception to that because I never said you shouldn't ask questions. I would never say don't ask questions. I mean, that's what we're here for, to ask questions and get to the right answer or the best answer. So please don't say that again.
Guys.
All right, Director Gray, did you have some another comment?
No, I just hope we can move on. I just hope our comments are accurate, because I don't think Director Williams implied not to ask questions, and certainly I didn't either. So I just don't want comments that kind of refers to that, because then it ends up being another discussion, because that was not the intent of my comments, and I don't believe Director Williams' comments either.
Okay. So after all of that discussion, and I do think that we've had a good discussion. I think that a lot of things that were discussed were appropriate, and helps everybody better understand where we are. So just trying to get through this list. We were talking about the last item. I think we were talking about. We moved on to the tertiary product pumps and BFD rehab.
Just for the public, what page are you on as a reference? So that we
It's page 91.
91 or 92?
I'm on 91 and 92.
Well, 91 and 92 flip back and forth, because I look at page 91 because it just has all the numbers on it. Or the budget and the total cost.
Joel, can you provide an overview of that, please?
Sure. This project, which is a CIP number 10092. In fact, there's an action item today at item 5D, if we get to it. But basically, this project is, we are talking about the very last stop at the Edwards Little Water Recycling Facility. We're talking about the pumping system that pushes out all the recycled water out to our satellite sites and to our customers. So this project is about initially replacing critical VFDs that have reduced our pumping capacity out of the Edwards Little Water Recycling Facility. We initially had 63 MGD of overall pumping capacity. With 3 of the VFDs out of service, we are now down to 47, which doesn't meet our reliability needs and may not meet our customer demands, our peak customer demands, if another pump goes down or another VFD goes down. So this project is to initially replace 3 critical VFDs to get us back to capacity. And there's also future design, which is a subsequent phase. And the overall cost for this project on the previous page, on page 91, would reflect additional design for additional rehab to the entire system, which includes the pumps themselves and other VFDs. But this first phase is about replacing 3 VFDs.
Okay, so the pumping capacity is what? You mentioned 2 numbers.
The design is 63 MGD. And right now with 3 VFDs down, which means 3 pumps down, we are down to 47 MGD. And our peak hour demand, sorry for interrupting you, is 44 MGD.
And how often does that occur?
I'm not sure if we have instantaneous peak data. I certainly don't have it at this time. That number was calculated in the master plan when there was an evaluation of the entire system. And I believe, for example, the monthly peak demand is about 29 MGD. there was a 35 MGD peak month demand in September 2020. I would say that's the most recent peak month of 35 MGD. But minute by minute or hour by hour, I don't have that information. Right now.
Just in going over kind of where that plant operates, it operates around 35 MGD. That's what we produce out of that plant. If you look at it for this last few, the last few years.
On average. On average.
On average. That's the average production of that plant. And I bring that up because as a board member, I have been asked by other parties, well, that facility can treat 90 million gallons per day of water. And I've always said, you know, theoretically, you have a pump station, they can pump that to the facility, but that facility cannot do that. And it's never been operated anywhere near that. Just why I'm asking that question. I don't want to get into a discussion because
We want an answer? Okay.
Well, give me an answer, but not a discussion.
Yeah, when we design pumping facilities, typically pump facilities designed for maximum day demand, the demand during the hottest day of the year. Make sure that and that's done if there is storage or reservoir in the system that could handle the peak hour demand. Our system is designed in a way where the storage is behind the pumps, not downstream of the pumps. And so our pumping capacity now has to be sufficient enough for peak hour design, which is the peak demand, the hour within the peak, within which the peak demand occurs. And that's why we bring it up here. And we don't necessarily bring up the average, but we do bring up that if we had a storage facility within the distribution system, that would make the need for, we wouldn't strive for a capacity of 47 standby. We would go for something less.
So, and we'll continue this conversation later, but I will come back to what is peak demand at a separate point, because I think that's something that needs to be fleshed out quite a bit further. This particular project and the other projects are all projects that, at least from my point of view, from what I've heard today, could probably be deferred some, whether a year or two down the road. It's not going to be critical one way or another. And I haven't heard any convincing argument otherwise in the statement that they are critical. We talked about the Nash Street plant rule already and the MCC replacement. Okay. So that category is done. The next category you got is the planning phase. Page 93. We were 91 and 92.
The solids handling improvement project refers to our solids handling facilities. There's waste collected from our treatment processes that go to the solid handling facility, and from that facility, we dewater the solids and produce the cake that is hauled off away from our sites. Several studies have been done over the last few years about the improvements that facility needs. It's come to its end of its useful life. We came back earlier in the year to present to the board to go out to an RFP. Questions were asked. We went back to perform an additional analysis and to see if we can do something that's a little bit more temporary that could buy us a few more years before we do a full replacement. And that is what we're going to come back in June and present to the E&O committee to say we have figured out something that could be more temporary, less money to spend, that will buy us a few more years on the existing facilities versus a complete replacement of the facility itself. And we're looking forward to presenting those findings to the E&O committee.
But you're making the recommendation now that this be included in the CIP, and if I look at the beginning of this, it is embedded in the current CIP that's before the board. So
Right, and this, the expenditure proposed here are for proceeding with design and making some immediate improvements to the facilities that are there today. So yes, we are recommending to proceed with this. The solids handling facility is one critical item that supports all the product water that we produce, everything. And it has been in bad shape. We showed some photos, presented some of the what is occurring out there, some of the challenges that we have out there in maintaining these facilities. With this expenditure, we're proposing to make some immediate type of repairs and then come back to do an initial rehab that will buy us a few more years versus the original thought about doing complete replacement. And that's what we're looking to share more information to the board. And we'd like to do so with the conclusion of a certain study or conclusion of a condition assessment to come back and share those, give those pieces of information, give the tools for the board to make decisions.
So if there's more studies and recommendations, do we need to commit to spending money now?
We feel like this is going to proceed. That's our recommendation. That will be our recommendation to the board, and therefore this is our recommendation to include that expenditure in there. There's obviously, you can include the expenditure, and if the committee does looks at the information that's presented to them, we can choose not to proceed with what we are recommending. Or we can do it the other way around too. Sure.
I think we've talked about this item previously in this committee, and the recommendation of the committee was that this was an item that could be deferred. And I thought we had talked about doing a study of diverting this, and I don't know what happened to that.
We looked at that, the cost of diverting the flows to the sewer. That's part of the thing that we wanted to show. We came back with revised numbers with the solids that we have today. The cost of going to the sewer outweighs the cost of the rehab.
Maybe we can go through that study and look at that first.
You certainly can. You can not put the expenditure, the board not put the expenditure next fiscal year, and then we present the study and the recommendation, and then you can decide whether you want to add it in next year's budget afterwards. Or we could do it the other way around as well.
The other way around. Right. All right, keep going through the rest of these items because, as Director Williams has pointed out, the time does go by.
Okay, go ahead. Okay. Safety bulk chemical storage improvements, and the one after that, Torrance satellite bulk chemical storage improvements. This is just a part of the overall program to rehab or replace chemical tanks. So we saw an example of that, one that you mentioned, Dr. Alvarez. The day tank at ACL, there's an entire program to look at all the chemical tanks and see which one of them are due for replacement. And so we have phased them out. And there are a couple that are critical here. The one for the Torrance one, the immediate need for that is the sulfuric acid tank. And that's mainly the one that's included in this next fiscal year budget. There are other tanks that will come in later years that we would propose for the committee. Phase 2, Phase 3 MF replacement. So we have microfiltration systems at the Edwards Little facility. We use those systems for both the barrier and for producing the boiler feed. for Chevron refinery. Over the years, we've increased the capacity of some of the microfiltration systems, or may recall the phase 4, phase 5, the Paul MF projects, the trailers that we put out there. We have the phase 2. As we built those MF capacities, we also at the same time lost capacity in some of the MF systems. The ones that were built as part of phase 2, phase 3 are offline today. And for us to maintain full capacity as much as we can to the barrier, and at the same time provide the boiler-free commitments to Chevron, we need to look into replacing the microfiltration systems. The refinery, Chevron refinery, has committed $10 million as part of our last boiler feed agreement to this particular project. And we're looking at starting with this expenditure. We're looking at starting the preliminary design phase for it. It's worth noting that these MF systems, again, could be used for advanced water treated as well as boiler feed. Future. The next one, the RO pretreatment, we do have a bottleneck in the cartridge filter systems for that, and there's if we wanted to get the full capacity for the barrier, then this is what this project does for. That's the expenditures for that bottleneck. Fiberglass piping at the Torrance satellite plant. That one, there's a certain segment of fiberglass piping that is the thickness is indicating its pipe will soon fail based on the assessment that we've done. And this was one that was not in previous years. This was one where we just got this year, late this year, a request from operations to include this in this fiscal year budget. This was not part of the 5-year CIP we had before. The North Lake valve replacement, as our Title 22 system exits our plant and splits south and north. North goes to Chevron satellite plant and goes up to LADWP and Inglewood. South goes to the 2 other satellite plants. There is a valve on the distribution system that's inoperable on the North Leg system. And it's prudent for us to replace that large diameter valve. This was also not part of the previous 5-year CIP, but was added per operations request from operations.
That valve is in the position now. It's open.
It's in position, and could it be delayed? Yes, at the risk of not being to close down the valve in a particular emergency. But yes, to answer your question before you ask it, it could be delayed.
I just want to go back to one item that you said, because I think we're done with the list, and that's back to the phase 2 and 3 MF replacement project. You said Chevron's going to pay the $10 million?
Yes.
I heard you correctly.
Yep. And that's an executed amendment to the boiler feed agreement.
So what's the district's cost then?
We are developing those costs right now. Initially, it was we had done an estimate. It was around 10 a few years ago when we were negotiating the amendments to the agreement. We are putting together costs right now to what it's really going to cost, and what we plan to doing. If we think it's going to be more than 10, probably 15. It depends on several factors that we're looking into: what type of MF system, what type of membranes we want to put in. Are they going to be similar to what we're looking at Carson, or otherwise? The cost differs. So depending on what we select, we're going to have to go back to Chevron and say, here's the cost based on today's dollars, and we would call for them to increase that amount or decrease it. I doubt that it's going to decrease, but and execute another amendment for it.
So basically, they've agreed to pay 100% of the cost, whatever that cost would be.
Yes.
Okay. Next is the early planning phase. Project.
Back at page 95. Inglewood Disinfection Station. So this is one where we had prepared a design. I think we mentioned it last go around, and on a site that later became unavailable. It was the city yard in the city of Inglewood. The purpose of this disinfection station is to address water quality issues we have in the city of Inglewood, particularly during the winter when the flows are very slow through the pipes. And odor is a little bit of an issue. And that is why this is on there for us to be able to hire real estate services to look for a separate site for the disinfection station, and see if we can use the old design as much as we can to complete the design of a new disinfection station. Distributed control system replacement. There's, as you can see, this is a $29 million project. I'm going to hand that over to Wendell, who's intimately involved in this project, to give a little bit of an overview.
As you may be aware of, or maybe remember, that we've reported on this project several times to the board over the last year and a half. Okay, and this is the upgrade of the distributed control system, which is all the automation on the plant. And essentially, what's in fiscal year 22-23 is the communication between the plants, and also to take a look at upgrades to the control room. The actual system is replacement is has a time frame over about 10 years to complete it. So it's about $29 million over 10 years. And some of the this estimate comes from an audit. It took a look at, yesterday where we were, what type of equipment, what type of facilities need upgrade. In some instances, some of these costs will be absorbed in individual projects, like for instance in the phase 2 and the phase 3 microfiltration replacement system at ECL. Those costs will be involved in that. The system is antiquated and it's old. There's issues with about 67% of the system being obsolete. Additionally, it is challenging to get parts and components, and even the type of communications between between the equipment is obsolete in some cases. No longer, we're using serial ports and stuff of that nature that are no longer supported by software packages.
And with this expenditure here, the recommendation from Conceptual is to do a complete overhaul, design build overhaul of our DCS system. We've elected to, knowing that there are still questions to be discussed about the Edwards Little plant and our satellite plants moving forward, we've instead elected to prioritize those and do, correct, Wendell, certain activities and not go with the overall project from the start.
Correct. And this first phase takes a look at the communication between the plants, particularly from Hyperion to ECL and the other satellite plants. It's involved either installing or leasing fiber optics so that the communication can be fast and swift. This first phase that we're working on, this would be something that wouldn't be a stranded asset. It would be essential communications from secondary effluent pump station to ECL is the largest leg of that, as well as communication between the other plants that receive Title 22 water, as well as operating the automation at the facility from one location, central location of the city.
The next two projects, Mills Park Recycle Water, that's a recycle water pipeline project, a purple pipe project to serve a park and middle school in the city of Carson, North Gardena. Same. The next project is also a purple pipe project to serve two sites. One would provide 35 acre feet per year of recycled water use. The other one, I think, 24 acre feet per year. It's important to note on these that we've received a Harbor South Bay appropriation of $1 million, particularly geared towards the design of the project. And also recently a congressional appropriation for roughly $3.8 million geared for the construction of the project. I believe EJ, manager of water policy and resource development, will be bringing in an agreement with the Army Corps of Engineers maybe next month to execute the agreement for those, make those appropriations executed through an agreement with the Army Corps of Engineers. We have J&M bulk chemical storage improvements similar to what we've discussed with the other satellite plants for Carson. We're already doing a lot of improvements during phase 2. So this is in the early planning stages. We don't have something that is as urgent as the other ones. So this expenditure here is to perform some condition assessment work to see if there's any need or not. The Hyperion Pump Station R&R project, this last week, you've heard there was a smoke coming into one of our pumps from the old pump station. But that's just to say that our pump station has, we built a new set of pumping facilities so we can do some rehab work on the old set of pumping facilities. This is a project to start looking into that and also do it in a way, in a phased way where we only do what's necessary. This and the one next to it, the Hyperion Force Main Condition Assessment. These two projects, we have refinery funding from two refineries for these two. The last amendment with Chevron and the last agreement for the Torrance nitrified. We make sure to get funding for both of these projects as they impact both of those refineries. West Basin Headquarters Conceptual Design Options. We have an item, an info item to share with the board about this, and the F&A committee has been reporting about the effort to develop conceptual options of potentially relocating to the Edwards Little plant. We'll talk more about that in a separate item. The MF replacement project feasibility study phase. The MF systems at the Torrance refinery plant, their performance have gone down significantly. Similar to what we saw in Carson, we're replacing those MF systems in Carson. The Torrance, we envision that those MF systems would need to be replaced as well. So we're proposing to conduct a feasibility study on what it would cost and go to the refinery and say, this is what it's going to cost to replace these MF systems with the feasibility study. And also part of this one too is because we are putting in the new MF systems at Carson, we're looking at perhaps making full use of the portable ultrafiltration system that we have over there and relocating that to Torrance in the meantime to be able to give them more of the boiler feed water in the meantime while we make those big decisions. Chevron high pressure, low pressure, VFD and pump R&R. We have 2 tanks and a pump station and some electrical equipment located on the Chevron property. earlier this year, we performed a condition assessment on all of them, and we actually determined what they're worth to, because we're in discussions with Chevron if whether they want to take a hold of those assets at some point. But what the condition assessment said is that the tanks look pretty good. The electrical equipment, however, needs some work, and the VFDs, there's no VFD anymore. It's not working. So this project is to get those back online and do some rehab work over there. The Torrance Waste Discharge Improvement Project, there is a little bit of a hydraulic bottleneck in the waste pipeline at the Torrance satellite plant. And what it does is that it increases the number of times we have to clean the membranes. And operationally, it increases cost, but not only that, it causes some water quality concerns. This has been in operations top 10 project for a while, but it involves refinery coordination and involves their buy-in because the discharge pipe goes through their property. So we're in continued talks with them about this particular project, and we're hoping that this year we can get something going on this one. The Title 22 common filter system. So earlier today, we talked about the filter basins. That was a separate project. We said we have 14 basins, 3 that have been rehabbed and others that may need rehab. But there are piping systems and structures in between that we've done some condition assessments on. This was put in a previous R&R study that we've done 2 years ago that said that these and others are critical. However, we're doing our due diligence to see exactly what is necessary to do about this. It's important for us to do so in these filters because, yes, if we do get MBR water, we're not going to need these filters. So our approach to these filter system is to see absolutely what needs to be done. That could buy us a few more years until hopefully we get MBR or we do MBR ourselves. The Carson Street recycled water connection. So this was a while back on Carson Street. There was we coordinated with the city to and they built a pipeline in Carson Street to connect some customers. The city is preparing to host the Olympics in 2028. Several Olympic events are going to happen in the city of Carson, and they've asked us to look, they asked us and Met Metropolitan Water District to look into what opportunities, recycled water opportunities are within the city of Carson. In our discussions, we said perhaps the first item that we could maybe look into is to look into how that pipeline that was built a few years ago that ultimately ended up getting only potable water. It's using potable water. But maybe we can go back and take a look at that pipeline and switch it over to recycled water. And this is the little funds that we put in there for us to do some due diligence for that. Is it absolutely necessary? The answer to that is no. But it's something that we said we could put it in here for the board's consideration, given the city of Carson's request from us and from Metropolitan Water District, who's looking to put in pipelines as part of the regional program in the city of Carson.
You have one more category under your.
We do.
Okay.
The annual page 97. These are more related to replacement of existing capital assets. And what we have here is on the top are items related to the DLD building, the IT server room. Servers are important for us to do our work, whether it's here or telecommuting. And there is HVAC and fire protection systems that are recommended for this. But what we did here is that we limited this scope to just replacing the HVAC and making sure that the server room is cooled efficiently and we don't have outages. The elevator modernization project, or sometimes we refer to it as the elevator upgrades. We've talked about that several times, and it's important to note that the elevators are safe. However, if we are staying at this building for some time, the board may want to consider bringing it up to code, to current code for this. And the air conditioning units, that's the air conditioning. Well, the third one on the list is the air conditioning for the building. Units do need to be replaced, and we talked about the boiler a couple of times, which needs to be replaced as well. The MF membrane replacement, RO membrane replacement, those are budgets for replacing the membranes at the Edwards Little plant and the satellite plants. And we have some refinery funding for that, particularly from Chevron for those items. Ops facility R&R, that refers to the budget for our operation, our contract operator to replace equipment, valves, transducers, certain assets that are deemed necessary to replace during the year. Same goes with compliance lab, is a budget for particular lab equipment that may need to be replaced. And IT/CIP projects, in this presentation, I think we provide a breakdown of what those are. Some involve budgets to replace laptops, the end of useful life of the laptop. Some include relate to the servers. Some are relate to this are security type of upgrades. Some related to the AV system at the ECL. And there's a full breakdown on, let's say, packet page 107 for the different IT type of projects.
Okay, that concludes basically the overall CIP. And if we add up all those items, what do we get?
We add up all those items, we get $57.9 million.
How much?
$57.9 million.
Perhaps we could go to page 99, which kind of brings everything together in terms of committed and non-committed.
Mhm.
If it so pleases the chair.
Okay, so now we can discuss this. Director Williams and other board members, any comments on all of the projects that have been presented in terms of moving forward with the CIP?
I'm going to hold my comments until I hear from the new general manager. It doesn't have to be today.
Well, any other board members have any comments?
This is Board Member Houston. I have none at this time, and I'll be leaving shortly.
Okay. Any other comments?
I'll just make the comment that I think the staff did a really good job, speaking today about the, various facets of each project. I don't think that was the plan for today's discussion, but I appreciate their taking the time to walk through with you, with the board today. As I mentioned in my earlier remarks, I am working with staff and my engineering manager to differentiate those projects that are not committed as to the ones that we need to recommend in terms of urgently going forward, and those that perhaps may be able to be deferred albeit with some level of risk that we may have to, take on or continue to carry as we defer maybe some replacements and rehabilitations. So having said that, we're in the midst of that process, and I'm relying on the expertise of my staff to help me work through all of that. And so I expect to bring that forward with our future budget presentations, which I believe are coming up in the next series of meetings.
I've been not aware of when we're going to have other budget presentations that are scheduled. Maybe you can shed some light on that.
So our plan is to provide a budget recap in the next week's Finance and Administration Committee meeting. We will also bring that same discussion forward in the board meeting, I believe on Monday, May 23rd. And our expectation is to summarize all of the various workshops in a manner that provides a key decision point for the board consideration when it comes to the June meeting. I don't know the exact date of the June board meeting. And so if there are other questions that may remain, hopefully we'll be able to identify those in those two meetings next week, an F&A and the board meeting on the 23rd, such that we could then have a vote of our board for the budget on the 27th of June. And with the expectation that we will have a budget that everyone can live with and go forward with into the next fiscal year. So just a short answer to your question, Chair Alvarez. So F&A next week, Wednesday, the 18th, and on the board meeting on Monday, the 23rd. And I'll defer to, I believe we have our finance manager, manager of finance, Margaret Moja, who might be able to clarify if I misspoke on any element of that.
No, that is correct. As far as our prepared workshops, those are the ones that you saw that were concluded on the last one on April 27th. The intent was for the May 18th Finance and Administration Committee to share sort of a recap of where we're at, discuss any sort of open items, let you know what we've incorporated in there, get any additional feedback so that we can present you a final budget. And to that extent, the discussion that today has been very helpful for us to understand how to present sort of a capital budget that is one that we can move forward with, that can be addressed within our budget dollars that we have for fiscal year 22-23.
Okay, so we're going to have the budget presented again, and the CIP budget announced. And this is a question, the budget and the CIP budget presented again at the Finance and Administration Committee meeting next week. So the CIP budget will basically be presented in a similar fashion as is today.
I wouldn't say that it's in a similar fashion as today.
Why not? The same recommendation in terms of projects will be presented to the Finance and Administration Committee.
We will have a recommendation as to the CIP level of funding, the operations budget, what we recommend from a rate increase perspective, and there may be a few other facets that we want to, put on the table for the board's consideration. I think Margaret mentioned also kind of making sure that any open items have been fully responded to. And so that way we could make sure the board has everything it needs in order to make an informed decision on June 27th. And we're going to repeat that same presentation, recognizing that not all directors attend the F&A. So we'll repeat that in the May 23rd full board. If you would like, Director Alvarez, or if you'd like to see a breakdown of the projects that are recommended, along with that, perhaps that's an additional component. Because I think it gets to the point of, okay, if we're saying 57.9 million, then that clearly is every single project that you've seen listed today. If we were to reduce that by some amount, then perhaps, those that are included, those that are excluded, or maybe use the word deferred, would be this, important information that you would like to see if we were recommending something lower than the 57 million.
That I would really appreciate.
Okay, we can do that.
And what I had hoped that we could do today, but we're not going to be able to, was come up with a more specific list to recommend to the board as to the projects that we think really need to be moving forward versus those that aren't. But we're not apparently prepared to do that.
We were internally in the process of developing that, but
Okay, we'll wait for your report on what specific recommendations would be, and then act at that point, and that will probably be, if not at the Finance and Administration Committee meeting next week, it'll be at the board meeting on the 23rd. Then we will be adopting the budget on the 27th of June, and there may or may not be a subsequent budget discussion in between. And I say may or may not be because there may be a request from some board members that we might want to have some further discussions in the budget.
And that's precisely why we're doing the May 18th and May 23rd, is so that if there is a need to provide additional follow-up, we have that time to come back with that additional follow-up.
But the budget will then hopefully be ready to go on June 27th.
Correct.
Do you have any other comments, Director Williams?
No further comment.
Okay. Any of the other directors have any comments?
No, thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
We're not able to discuss individual projects, but I have one, and I think you've all heard this from me before. I think that as we move forward, we do need to reconsider some of the facilities, and that the level of investment that we continue to make may need to be refocused, and to the extent that we need some additional time to understand what that focusing would be, implies that there's a need to defer a lot of these projects, because depending on what that ultimate focus is, a lot of these projects are really not necessary. We have a facility and a series of facilities that were designed and built 30 years ago, 27 years ago now. They are approaching the end of their life, where they require an awful lot of investment to continue to operate for another 30 years. But how they operate and what they produce is a fundamental question that this board needs to address. And I believe that there are substantial issues behind that. And that continued investment and spending of dollars, especially when we're financing some of these expenditures, and the way that the budget is currently presented and the way I currently understand it, it includes debt financing, and I think that debt financing of some of those projects would be stranded investments and not really worthwhile to pursue. I have not received convincing information that a lot of these projects are at all necessary. That's just my opinion, and that would influence how I vote. Obviously, the other directors will take the same information and determine how they're going to vote. But I just want to express my concern as to moving forward. I can't reiterate enough that as far as the facility is concerned and as far as our water supply is concerned, that water supply today is only good through June of 2026. And we have, as of this point in time, no long-term agreement for any additional water supply. So to keep a facility operating for something that you don't have an input for and continue to make investments, in my opinion, is not a wise decision. If that facility is going to operate for another 10 years, because we may have an agreement for an additional 10 years worth of water, then the level of investment that we would make, I think, would be different than the level of investment that we would make if it's for 30 years. I personally do not think that it is worthwhile to continue to invest money in producing water for Title 22 purposes. And I think that facility can be better used to produce indirect portable reuse. I think that if we're going to be true to the urban water management plan that we adopted last year, that we do need to change the overall operation of that facility. I think if we're going to be honest player in trying to address the region and basically the problem of the induced by the drought in the west of the declining ability to use imported water and developing sustainable resources, that we need to refocus that facility as a facility that basically takes all of the water that it can get, assuming that we can get a known long-term supply of water on a regional basis, and treat that water to an indirect portable reuse and ultimately direct portable reuse. And then in so doing, that requires a whole repurposing and reconfiguration of the EDC Little plan. And that is what my interest is and what I will continue to support. And I want to put that out on the table so all of my colleagues on the board understand at least where I'm coming from. And that we all do need to sit down and address the issue of how West Basin continues to meet its commitment to deliver a long-term water supply to our service area. Director Wilson, sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Do I hear you saying that you are prepared to introduce proposals before the board that we can vote on? Before you can get that, you have to have someone to support your proposal. In other words, you have to make a motion.
Right now, I'm just making commentary.
Okay.
Because we prefaced it that we're not going to make any decisions today. You're not prepared to make a decision till the general manager comes back.
That's correct.
With his comments. So therefore, we're not going to be able to do anything today. We are going to reconsider these items in the Finance and Administration Committee meetings. We're going to reconsider this again at our regular board meeting of May 23rd. And there may be a subsequent meeting to discuss these items. And then ultimately, then they have to be voted on June 27th. So at that time, between now and that time, everybody can think about what they really want to support and how the district should be moving forward. I just wanted to put out my thoughts, what I favor that we do, and at least everybody understands where I'm coming from. I would appreciate hearing the same from others. It's very hard to read people's minds. And I am a believer in, you let people know what you think and how you think, and then accept the same from others. So to that end, I've always tried to be as straightforward and open as I can be.
Well, Motions are always in order.
All right, so with that, I had hoped that we would be making some recommendations as to what the capital improvement program should look like. But we will not be doing that today. We will move on to the next item. And the next item that I had asked that you put on is the item of the West Basin headquarters relocation. That is an item that's also being considered, I think, at the F&A committee. I'm not quite sure, but it would be of interest to me because I was on the our website. I go into the website from time to time to look at what types of projects are being, or services and contracts are being solicited. And I noticed that we were out soliciting architectural and engineering services for a new headquarters building. And when I saw the scope of work and so on that was being solicited, I was a little bit concerned as to where we're moving forward in terms of considerations for a new headquarters facilities if we end up moving from the DLD building here. And so I wanted to see that flushed out a little bit more, and I also wanted to make some comments about how we solicit engineering and contractual services. So with that, I understand there is a presentation, so go ahead and make the presentation. Let's try to keep that short and sweet.
Okay, thank you, Chair Alvarez. And so staff, I alerted staff of the interest in looking at the scope of the RFP as it related to certain items that were communicated in the solicitation, specifically related to kind of the Etsy Little facility and what was communicated as available areas for consideration. But with that being said, staff is here to provide a broader overview of the solicitation, but focus specifically in on that question. Sounds today that there may be some additional questions that maybe I did not alert staff to in terms of the manner in which we are soliciting, but I have every confidence in my staff being able to respond to that on the fly as they did with the previous presentation. So with that, I will hand it over to, I believe, Kevin Cullen, our engineer 3, who works for our engineering manager, Barkev Mazurlian. Kevin, please.
All right. Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon, Chairman Alvarez, members of the committee and board. As mentioned, I'll be providing an update on our West Basin headquarter DLD building relocation ongoing effort, specifically an ongoing solicitation for architectural and engineering services related to conceptual design options out at the Edward C. Little facility. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, we do have a solicitation that's currently active. Actually, proposals were received yesterday. We received 5 proposals for this effort. So the relocation effort is focused on the following goals listed here. First goal is to provide a strong public identity for West Basin and improve public access, things like meetings, events, and tours. Secondly, find the right size building structure and associated parking to bring the best value to the district and the public, maintain operational efficiency, provide financial benefits to West Basin, and make best use of available space, both indoor and outdoor, open land and existing structures, while considering current and potential requirements for treatment plant operations and or expansions. And finally, to create.
Excuse me, Kevin. Excuse me, Kevin.
Go ahead, Director Williams.
Yeah, what page are we on?
This is the handout that they gave us. You got it there to your right. There it is.
There is one in.
Page 2.
Oh, this is okay.
Yeah, I should have explained that. My apologies. We have an updated presentation that I believe was emailed out prior to today's meeting, but also provided as a handout, which you have now have right there in front of you. So for those who may be online,
We just throw that away.
For the one that was in the
In the package.
posted package, you can set that aside and refer to the handout that you have in front of you.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
And so for our other directors online, you should also have received that email also. Sorry for not mentioning that.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And the final goal for the relocation effort is to create a flexible workplace environment for West Basin employees that would best allow them or us to serve our constituents for the next 50+ years. So just a couple major highlights of the solicitation that aren't talked about here. There will be a upfront research phase. The research phase will focus on determining high-level visions, goals, and objectives for the conceptual designs through 3 separate visioning and/or programming workshops. So there'll be a workshop held with West Basin staff, one with West Basin management, and one specifically with the board of directors, where everyone will have an opportunity to provide input that'll follow and provide input for the basis of the conceptual design. So these workshops will occur before the conceptual design effort begins. And then the second highlight I wanted to mention was that the conceptual design effort currently has scope to provide 4 different conceptual design options, provided the input from all parties. The first design would look at public meetings only at the Edward C. Little facility. Second would be public meetings and West Basin staff only. Third would be public meetings with West Basin staff and contract operator staff. And then finally, the fourth option would be public meetings with some sort of hybrid in-office and or virtual model for both sets of staff. Next slide, please. The image shown here is just a aerial view of the Edward C. Little water recycling facility property. This image was included in the solicitation. You can see the highlighted areas here were only intended to identify the open areas of land. The solicitation will look at existing structures for potential reuse and or reconfiguration. And yeah, exactly. Next slide, please. Just wanted to update the board where we're at in the solicitation schedule. The solicitation was posted on our e-procurement online system, Marcel, on April 6th. The pre-proposal conference and job walk was held at the Edward C. Little facility on April 14th. During this job walk, staff toured consultants who were interested in the solicitation through the whole facility. That included the lobby, water education center, the coastal conference rooms, the warehouse, the lab area, and throughout the whole facility as well. Proposals were due, as mentioned yesterday, May 10th. We received a total of 5 proposals from architectural and engineering firms. First look, we have some good solid contenders there. We plan to make a shortlist notification next week to candidates, hold interviews during the week of May 23rd, bring a notice of recommended award back to E&O on June 8th, and then provide a final recommendation to the board of directors on June 27th. So with that being said, I'd like to stop here and keep it concise and ask the board if you'd like me to continue with the presentation to provide details on the scope of services included, or I can stop here and take any questions.
Director Williams. What would
I have
be your
none.
preference?
I have none.
Any other directors have any preferences? Okay, I'm good with what you presented so far, and I think at this point we can have some comments made on it. So do you have any comments as to what you've heard and what you'd like to see in terms of a new headquarters facility?
The only thing I'd like to see at the new facility is to make sure that our meeting room, our public meeting room for our board meetings looks like it was intended for that purpose. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Any other board members have anything in terms of desire for a new headquarters facility? I will, I do have some comments on it and some of the concerns. I think that we need to be more focused and realistic and understand that we're working within a budget. That the funding for the headquarters facility would basically come from the proceeds of the sale of the DLD building. And that may require a bridge loan, but if effectively, there will be, I would only support a project that spends as much money as we get from the sale of the building. I would like to see us move into the operations building. I think that there is an opportunity to convert the operations building to the headquarters building. Yes, that does require the movement of the SUAS operation, Wanda Laboratory on the easterly side and their warehousing on the westerly side to trailer spaces or to trailers out in the SC Little facility. And that should be something that I would encourage that we look at, and that we look at then converting that facility within the budget of the proceeds from the sale of this building to a headquarters building. And I couldn't agree more with Director Williams that in doing so, we should have a board meeting room that actually is set up to truly function as a board meeting room. It's the current arrangement that the district has had for a long time is an awkward one at best. So that would be the direction that I would like to see this pursued in. And not that we spend an awful lot of time. I think that the way the scope of work is written right now, there should be quite a bit of time being spent on looking at alternatives that may or may not have a lot of board support. And I just want to put that out there so that we don't go out and come back with all of these potential alternatives, some of which we can not afford, or which will cost us more money than we have. And that issue should be avoided. So I wanted to put that on the table. That's why I asked that this be back. I don't think it's practical or that we should pursue building any permanent facility, especially at the NC Little building. I don't see that as a worthwhile pursuit, and I would not have the architectural engineering firm spend their time in that direction. So that's just my comments and how I would try to influence and provide direction for the scope of work that I would like to see and that I would vote to approve. So with that, I do want to address one other issue, and that's the issue of how we solicit engineering services and contracts for construction. So I've had at least one board member say, yeah, how do we do it? And the staff always comes back and says, well, you know, it's been put out there in 1,000 or 60,000 or some other number that we get, that it's a very large number of firms that have seen our solicitation for services. I would like to see our solicitation for services really streamlined and made easy for small consulting firms and small contractors. Right now, if you can get to the solicitation, so you'd have to go to the website, you have to go to About Us. There's a whole series of links up at the top of ribbon of our website. You have to click on that, and when you click on that, a little menu drops down. One of the menus is doing business with us. So if you click on that, Then you go to a page that says doing business with us. And then you have to read through that page in order to find out, how do I do business with the district? And so there, you can go through, and then you have to click on bidding opportunities. When you click on bidding opportunities, it says click current bidding opportunities. Then you go to another site, which is the Mercell site, that is what we use in terms of getting it out there. And then you have to go and scroll through a whole series of other projects that are on the Mercell site and look for the West Basin projects. And yes, there are those of us who do that. And larger firms that have marketing departments do that. Small consultants don't necessarily do that and won't spend the time and effort. And I would like us to be much more open in terms of our business opportunities that we have for the community. And I think we can streamline this process down instead of having a process that's very, it's doable. It does potentially reach as many people are on the Mercell site, which are thousands, because I definitely saw a lot of projects from areas in Florida and Texas and all over the southeast United States. And there we were, West Basin, surrounded by, boy, you'd think we were in the South. But I'm sure that if I go at other pages, I would see different areas because it does change over time. It would be nice if in that first ribbon that we have, when you go to the website, the West Basin website, westbasin.org, that one of the items is doing business with West Basin. And if you click doing business with West Basin, you go to a page and it says, here's the procurement for services, here's the procurement for materials, here's the procurement for contracts, and anybody can just click on that and access that information. In addition to that, I do think that we need to be out there on the wider e-bid type of servers reaching the larger community. But for small contractors, consultants, and vendors, they should be able to just get on our site and very easily see how to access the business opportunities with the district. And we do have a lot of potentially small businesses that can do business with the district. And there's no reason why our system has to be so convoluted and so obtuse that a large corporation that has a marketing department knows how to use it. And there are consultants that know how to use that type of service. But there's a lot of people that get on there and say, I don't even know, where do you go? Most people would click on community. But when you click on community, that does not take you to doing business with the district. You have to click about us. And then a menu drops, and you got to click on doing business with the district. And then you go to them, one more click, and then it takes you to the Mercell site, and this is what you get. But pages of it. And you have to scroll through all the pages to find West Basin. Yes, you can try to search and do in other words, or you can, they give you the opportunity in there to go ahead and register with Mercell. And then Mercell, if you're registered, I'm assuming I didn't bother to register. I always just go into the district site and I go through the routine that they would then send you updates. We have this new solicitation from West Basin. But it would just be nice for others, small businesses, to be able to see how you do business with the district and what business opportunities are there. So I would encourage us to, I don't think it's that much work to modify the website to have up on that first ribbon, all right, one click that says, hey, this is how you do business, and keep it simple. That same solicitation that was sent out for the engineering services, architectural services, for the headquarters building, could have also been done the other way. And yes, you could put it on the bigger site, you could put it in the Merck floor site, and the people that are registered in Merck floor would get their uh, uh, notice that there's another opportunity over at West Basin. But otherwise, the staff will simplify it for the little guys that don't necessarily want to register. Or haven't figured out how to get to that registration point.
I would support that.
Thank you. And we do have an awful lot of small businesses within our service area. And I think a lot of those small businesses would appreciate at least knowing easily what's available. Because I've had more than one comment, and I think Director Williams has said the same, is, well, how do you get a contract over there? Or you guys always hire the same firm.
Same firms,
Same firms.
over and over again.
And it's like, really, do we have to always hire the same firms? And we'll be seeing that again today. The same firms. Amazing. You'd think that there's no other consultants out there in the world. And I think that we just need to afford those opportunities to others. Mr. General Manager.
I really appreciate your comments there, Director Alvarez and Director Williams, agreeing with you there. If it's appropriate, and let me capitalize I and F, if this is appropriate, I'd like to propose that we have a standing item on this committee to report out on our progress to provide simple and easy access to our procurement opportunities. And so that means that we'll undertake an effort to look at our website and implement modifications and report back to this committee, and so that's complete.
Yeah.
And I'm open to other approaches if that's not appropriate.
No, I think that it's pretty straightforward. All you have to do is
Yes.
add one more column to that ribbon, click on that, and those opportunities drop down, and they're right there, and somebody can download without having to go through 10 clicks and try to figure out how to get from A to B, and just download and say, oh, architectural services, I do that.
Right.
I'm going to click on it.
Okay. So it sounds like maybe it's not
It's pretty straightforward.
something that you're interested in having a report back on. Just get it
No,
done.
I just think you guys ought to do it, unless Director Williams or one of the other directors, but it's pretty straightforward. This is not brain surgery.
And I think it's very important for us to open up the opportunities for diverse and inclusive vendors to participate in the opportunities that we have here.
Yeah, this is Director Gray. I got some comments. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
You know, I
Go ahead, Director Gray.
Yeah, I agree with the point that Director Alvarez initiated and Director Williams supported. My point has to do with process, because any suggestion can come from a board member. This is a committee meeting and there's a process. Unless you have three people, a majority of the board agreeing with the direction that you guys give the director, the general manager, then any board member of one or two can give the direction to the general manager, and he goes up doing whatever you want. So we have to agree on a process. So you can't just arbitrarily tell him this is what you want him to do without the majority of the board and director. Alvarez did say, unless any other board member has some comment, but I don't believe Director Beard's on the phone. I think Director Houston has dropped off if he had another engagement. So I think we need to agree on a process. I certainly agree with what Director Alvarez just said, because I think that's very much needed, that three board members agreeing with it. But I want to remind the general manager and the rest of the board members that you can't just take a direction from one or two board members, and that's the direction of the board. That's the policy of the board. I don't believe that's something we should do. That's not democratic. That's not the way the board should function. So I just want to remind you there is a process.
Okay, and that's why I have the big IF capital if it's appropriate. So thank you, Director Gray, for that really appropriate reminder of the proper decorum and protocol as to how the board should function.
Absolutely. Okay.
Okay, any other comments? All right, if not, let's move down to the item 5A, which is the approval for unit price increases in the delivery of sodium bisulfite. Gentlemen.
Okay, so we have our operations engineer, Susanna Lee, who is prepared to brief the board on this particular item and submit our recommendation for consideration. So please, Susanna.
Good evening, and thank you, Greg, for introducing the item. And good evening to everyone. So please turn to page 4 of your package to find the copy of the memo. As Director Alvarez has alluded to, this item is requesting the board for approval for adjusting the unit price for sodium bisulfite. And sodium bisulfite is used to remove chlorine as part of 2 of the recycle treatment processes. And as with the rest of the chemicals, it's the vital component of producing recycled water that West Basin produces. And as the board is well aware and have gone through several iterations and number of the requests from a couple of our chemical vendors, staff is here today to seek board approval on the unit price increase for sodium bisulfite from the current price of $0.4286 per dry pound to $0.473 per dry pound, beginning May 26, 2022. And given staff's assessment of the chemical market, the supply chain issues, and the criticality of chemical to West Basin's recycled water operations, staff recommends that West Basin adjust its chemical unit price to meet the current market conditions. Because West Basin requires this chemical to serve the recycled water, and we cannot risk situations without the delivery of this chemical. And as such, though, staff has regularly been updating the board on the chemical market volatility, and many of the water agencies are actually in the same shoes, and we are working with water associations and even EPAs to try to address these ever increasing costs. The truth of the matter is that the chloroalkali products, chlorine bisulfite and sodium hydroxide, which is caustic, are currently estimating to increase between 10 to 12% each quarter until at least mid-2023. And this is not just due to the supply chain issue, but also because the chloroalkali producer extreme constraint situation due to a number of other reasons. For one is that a number of plants have been shut down due to fire or due to other regulation issues. Furthermore, EPA has been actually proposed a TSCA rule that may impact the chloroalkali producing procedure, and that's to shut down the asbestos membrane equipment to be used as part of the production. So that will potentially impact this chloroalkali products tremendously. So all these water associations and water agency will be working and with EPA to present to them how much of impact that rule will be to the industry, and not to mention the unit prices. So before I would read the recommendation, staff want to point out that there is going to be revised recommendations that was submitted to the full board. Before those, there are a couple errors that were not caught. One of them is that revised from interim general manager to general manager, and the second one is the beginning of the date of unit price adjustment from May 15 to May 26. So with that, I will read the recommendation that the board authorizes the general manager to amend agreement W2966 for supply and delivery of sodium bisulfite to reflect an increase in unit price to 0.4730 per dry pound for sodium bisulfite deliveries beginning May 26, 2022. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
You have any questions, Director Williams?
No,
The other board members have any questions?
No, thank you.
I do have a question. Didn't we at our last board meeting approve a series of adjustment for purchase of chemical, including sodium bisulfite with JCI Jones?
Yes, that those pricing are for the new fiscal year. So this unit price adjustment that JCI has requested is for the duration between May 26th to the end of June 30th, which is the remainder of the current contract term.
Okay. So you're now asking for 473. I think that what we approved at the board meeting was 47 cents pound.
47 what? Yes. And
Um,
this notice was received after the price adjustment request back in March, I believe. So we have asked them, we have pointed out the difference, but at this point, they have not request the adjustment. So we will carry on with what we recommended last month until they come back with a new price.
Okay, but what we have approved at the board meeting was 47 cents a pound, not 47.3. This is 0.47 versus 0.47. So we're gonna pay more till July 1, and then July 1, we're gonna go to the agreement that we approved at the board meeting? Or are they gonna come back? My feeling is, I'll just tell you what I think. They're gonna come back and you're gonna tell us, we really need to pay them 0.473, not 0.47.
Or perhaps more.
So just clarify it, and when you take it to the full board, go back to Jason Jones and say, what is it gonna be? We have a contract that was approved at 47 cents, not at 47.3. It is gonna be what it's gonna be. Just get a clarification.
They're asking for 47.3 for this fiscal year, and then dropping down to 47 next
And I
one.
don't think they will. J.C. Jones is the one that keeps coming back and asking for more. Of all of the vendors that you brought to us last time,
Yeah.
they're the ones that had
JCI
asked
and Miles.
retroactively to get compensated versus some of the others. And then somebody else, I forget who the other one was, came in, Miles came in and said, hey, if they're getting it.
I agree. So they did
So-
this mistake. So we're hoping that will.
So
Unfortunately, this is.
I get it.
Yeah.
I understand what's going on.
And I
I'm just saying,
understand.
Just be honest about how much it's gonna cost and tell them to tell you what it is. And not keep coming back over and over.
And that's the argument that they're making, is that they're trying to commit to a price, but they're saying it's really out of our hands and we can't project these prices too long into the future, is the argument that they're making. And we have talked to other water districts and they're going through the same thing. So.
Just to say that we just went through this, we're bringing it back.
Yep.
Tell them that. Because I remember, I go, I think we just approved 47 cents. Why are we approving a little bit more now? That's all. So we'll be recommending that this move forward to the full board. And, you know, this is again, one of those cost increases that impacts our budget, that we need to find savings within our budget to pay for. All right, the next item up is the hauling and disposal of or beneficial reuse of solids from the Etsy Little facility. So Mr. General Manager, take that one.
Yes, we have our Water Quality and Environmental Compliance Supervisor, Jamie Malpete, here to provide a briefing to the board and our recommendation on this item. So Jamie, please.
Thank you very much, Greg. Good evening, Chairman Alvarez and members of the board. I'm here today to present the action item listed in your packet on page 8 for the award of the contract for the hauling and disposal or beneficial reuse of solids from the Edward C. Little water recycling facility. West Basin Municipal Water District generates over 25,000 wet tons of solid annually at Edward C. Little water recycling facility. According to Edward C. Little's NPDES permit, wastewater discharge permit, West Basin is required to reuse or dispose of these solids in compliance with federal regulations and permit requirements. West Basin currently uses the services of Denali Water Solutions to haul solids offsite in land applications such as compost and soil amendment. The contract with Denali expires on June 30th, 2022. A request for proposal was released to Marcel on March 22nd, 2022. 6 companies accepted the invitation to bid. 2 companies, Denali and Cinegro West LLC, attended the mandatory job walk and submitted proposals. 3 people evaluated this proposal, including an outside evaluator from Veolia. The scope of services can be found in attachment A on page 12 of your packets. The summary of the final evaluation scores and rankings is provided in table 1 on page 9 of your packet. Recent supply chain and labor shortage events have caused delays in solids hauling and disposal around the state, with West Basin being hit particularly hard. To successfully manage solids handling, West Basin is recommending awarding contracts to both Denali and Cinegro. Staff proposes Denali as the primary hauler, providing 2 to 5 trucks per day. Cinegro will provide a minimum of 1 truck per day with the ability to provide more if primary hauler issues arise. 2 contracts are recommended by operations staff for the following reasons. The past 2 years have seen nationwide supply chain issues related to staffing, drivers, and the availability of end user facilities. Therefore, the operations department is working to solidify multiple supply options and contracts as other agencies do. To decrease risks associated with compliance and supply chain management, West Basin is structuring the solids program to utilize more than 1 contract. When solids are not removed in time or at the correct amount, the recirculation causes water quality issues. This can result in supplementing with potable water, decreased recycled water sales, water quality standards exceedance, and extra hauling costs from emergency hauling. When recycled water treatment is suspended due to the inability to process solids, it can cost West Basin up to $830,000 per month. Having multiple haulers that are available to utilize different driving companies and end-using facilities ensures that solids removal can remain consistent and adhere to West Basin's established schedule. Solids handling costs vary based on weight of load, the disposal locations, potential fuel surcharges, liner replacement, and extra trailers. West Basin's operations staff works diligently to minimize costs, encouraging the use of primary end facilities and local disposal when possible, and reusing truck liners. Attachment C on page 20 of your packet lists the breakdown of all costs associated with each hauler for different scenarios based on partial loads and the addition of surcharges for illustrated and budget calculation purposes. Table 3 on page 10 of your packet summarizes the projected annual cost per hauler for a total of 5 loads per day. I will now read the recommendation. That the board authorize the general manager to enter into 2 agreements based on prices set forth in the price proposal forms in attachment B on page 18 of your packet for a term of 2 years, beginning July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2024. A primary agreement with Denali for solids handling and disposal services for 2 to 5 loads per day, 7 days per week, and a separate secondary agreement with Synagro for solids handling and disposal services for 1 load per day, 7 days a week, or as needed if the primary hauler is unable to deliver loads on specific day. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Cinegrill sounds like a high-end restaurant, but I know it just.
I'd go there.
I think I'll pass on that one.
Chair's gone, so I would, here he is right here. I would move staff's recommendation. Just in time.
So we're at the wrapping it up.
Right. And so I would support staff's recommendation.
I would agree. I do have one question.
Yes.
On that contract, there is a termination. If we need to terminate them early, we can just give them a week notice or 30-day notice or something like that. Because it's a long-term contract.
It's a 2-year contract. I don't know if we would be able to terminate the contract with a 30-day notice. I would have to look into that. That might be something to draft in the language for the contract itself.
I would like to see the ability to terminate the contract for whatever reason the district had. It would just give them whatever, 15-day notice, 30-day notice, something like that. It's typically appropriate in most contracts.
Yeah.
I would have to look into that and talk to procurement about that. I will investigate it.
Okay. So with that, you can move forward?
Yes. We'd have an answer for that at the board meeting.
Okay, then the next item up is the awarded construction contract for the brewer desalter decommissioning. Mr. General Manager, finally, go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Chair Alvarez. We do have Orlando Rodriguez, our senior engineer, who is prepared to brief the board and provide the recommendation for this action item. Orlando, Mr. Rodriguez, please.
Good evening, Chairman Alvarez and members of the board. So now if you could please turn to page 21 of your agenda packet for a copy of the staff report. So first, I would like to say, this is a culmination of events that began early last year. As you might recall, in February of 2021, staff gave a historical review of the desalter and an analysis of alternative paths forward for the board's consideration. In addition to the alternative paths presented, the committee then requested that staff look into the option to divest West Basin from the desalter. So in March of 2021, staff presented an evaluation of considerations to divest from the facility, and as such, the committee recommended that the board establish an ad hoc committee, for all matters regarding the desalter moving forward. So shortly thereafter, the ad hoc committee held discussions with regional stakeholders about the potential sale of the desalter facility, and in June of last year, 2021, West Basin extended an offer to WRD for the sale of the desalter itself. WRD then extended a counterproposal that included the purchase price of $1.5 million for the groundwater extraction well, along with other terms for a purchase agreement. So at the board of directors meeting on August 23rd of last year, 2021, the board approved the sale of the groundwater extraction well to WRD. So then discussions then began between all the affected parties, including Cal Water, which we leased the site from, and WRD on, the project parameters for decommissioning the facility. Additionally, staff worked with West Basin's operators, including Veolia and Inframark, on what items can be reused at West Basin's other facilities. And during this time, the development of drawings and specifications began in-house along with the start of the plan check process at the City of Torrance's Building Safety Department to obtain a building permit for demolition of the site itself. Both the approval of the plan check process and the completion of a formal bid package for solicitation occurred in March of this year, 2022. For a copy of the approved project drawings, you could please refer to attachment A, which is on page 24 of the agenda packet. So the bid solicitation for construction services was issued via West Basin's online procurement system on March 30th. A pre-bid meeting was held on April the 12th via teleconference, followed by an on-site job walk on that same day. 7 construction firms attended the pre-bid meeting, and 2 construction firms attended the on-site job walk. The bid opening was held on April the 27th at the DOD building, and 4 bids were received by the 2 p.m. submittal deadline. So for a summary of the bids, you could also refer to Table A, which is on page 22 of the agenda packet, but I do want to state here that unfortunately there's a typo. I believe the staff report shows American Integrated Systems, and that should actually be American Integrated Services. So the staff will correct that prior to going to the board. I just wanted to point that out now. From the 4 received bids, American Integrated Services, which are headquartered actually nearby in Wilmington, was found to be the lowest responsible and responsive bidder, with a submitted bid amount of $283,303, which is well below the engineer's cost estimate of about $400,000. West Basin has not previously awarded a capital project to American Integrated Systems, but our operators, Veolia, have actually contracted smaller in-house projects to this firm, and they have worked at our treatment facilities. So just on a smaller scale, but they have worked with us. Additionally, staff did reach out also to the submitted references provided by American Integrated Systems, and all essentially had some glowing remarks and will essentially work with them in the future. So in summary, I would like to read the recommendation that the board authorize the general manager to enter into an agreement with American Integrated Services for construction services on the C. Marvin Brewer Dissolved Decommissioning Project in the amount of $283,303 plus a 20% contingency for a total not to exceed contract amount of $339,963.60. And thank you. And at this time, I would like to, I'll be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Any questions, Director Williams? Any comments?
No, it sounds like a good deal. The bid prices was good, and I know that we had a subcommittee or ad hoc committee involved, and we had our top-notch directors involved in that. So I'm ready to approve staff's recommendation.
Any other board member comments? Recommendation.
No, thank you. No.
Director Gray,
No,
go ahead.
thank you. No, thank you. I think that's a good choice recommendation. Thank you.
So happy to see this day actually come. And, we are awarding this contract for something that started as Orlando explained it when he presented the staff report back in February of last year.
Can we create a meme out of that?
What's that?
Can we create a meme out of that? You're happy to?
Yes, you can. And that we're actually going to spend less money on this part of the project than on the income that we're receiving from the sale of the well. So, and it's a net addition to the West Basin General Fund. And that's a good thing that should be noted. And I'd like to also commend staff that this project, and I believe that they can do more, was done by staff in-house, was not one that we had to go out and pay consultants to do, etc. Orlando, I know that you worked quite a bit on this project, and kudos to you for finally getting this out the door, and that's all to the good. So very happy day today with respect to this particular item.
Fantastic.
Okay, so moving on. The next item up is procurement of variable frequency drives for the tertiary product water pump system. And should we have this one, Mr. General Manager?
We do. We have our engineering supervisor, Joel Blair, who is prepared to brief the board and present our recommendation on this particular action item. So please, Joel.
Thanks, Greg. Good evening, directors. Agenda item 5D starts on page 29 of the agenda packet. This is an action item with a staff recommendation to purchase replacement variable frequency drives, or VFDs, for the disinfected tertiary product water pump system at the EDC Little plant. If you can please turn to page 33 of the agenda packet, we can review the system and its purpose. So on page 33 of the agenda packet, we have an aerial view of the product water pump system. This is essentially the final stop at UCL for our Title 22 or disinfected tertiary product water. We have 2 basins here and 8 pumps to push the water to our customers. The pumps themselves are controlled by VFDs. The VFDs protect the pumps. They allow for smooth adjustment of flow rates, and they maintain efficient energy usage. With these VFDs, we can ramp up pump operation. We don't have to do a damaging start-stop procedure, and we also only use the energy that's needed. Instead of inefficiently running the pumps at full speed and using a valve to control the flow, we can actually reduce the electricity that goes to the pumps. So let's please turn to page 34, the next page of the packet. So on page 34, we have a diagram of the same system. We have the 2 basins, we have the 8 pumps, and we have 6 VFDs. This diagram also shows by the crossouts and the stricken text which VFDs are out of service right now. 3 of the 6 VFDs are out of service. And so our pumping capacity, originally 63 MGD, is now reduced to 47 MGD. So we have a customer peak hour demand of 44 MGD. You can see that at the bottom middle where it says customers there. That is the peak hour demand. And normally, for reliability purposes, we would want that capacity available from the pumps, plus 1 standby pump, usually the largest pump, to be available also. So on top of that 44 MGD, we would normally want at least 54 MGD of pumping capacity. And at this time, we only have 47 with these offline VFDs. So again, with 1 additional failure of a VFD or a pump, we would be taking 10 MGD off that 47 number. And so we would be down to 37 MGD, and thus we wouldn't have the capacity to meet our peak hour demand. Can you please go to the next page? So to summarize, the benefits of replacing these VFDs is to strengthen the reliability of the system. We want to protect the distribution system and the satellite sites, and we want to restore the capacity back to 63 MGD. Reliability is strengthened because if we lose another pump, we wouldn't be able to meet our customer demands. We also protect our system from water hammer, from pressure transients, with the ability to control the pressures with these VFDs. And also, we would also restore our pumping capacity. And I'd like to highlight that in this case, whatever the future is for the ECL facility, we will need capacity to pump out of the facility and distribute it to our customers, our future customers even. And whatever that water is, whether it still is disinfected tertiary or any type of other future water, we would still use these VFDs and these pumps. If we could please turn to page 36. We have the anticipated schedule for the VFDs. Of note here is that the lead time for fabrication is about 6 months. So that is why here we are recommending to pre-procure the VFDs now at this time to start the clock on fabrication. And so 6 months from June, we would expect to have the VFDs delivered to ECL around December. And in the meantime, that's when we would go out to bid and procure an installation contractor. At this time, I would like to summarize our procurement method for these VFDs. We could please turn to page 30 of the packet. So for these VFDs, we are recommending that they be procured via our membership with Omnia Partners Public Sector. Omnia is a national cooperative purchasing organization. As a member, we, West Basin, have access to pre-negotiated agreements between nationwide public agencies and vetted suppliers. So these other public agencies have negotiated terms with vendors, and we are able to access them and receive the same discounts that they can receive. So through Omnia, we initially received 2 quotations for these VFDs. One supplier did withdraw on Friday their quotation, but the remaining quotation here from Wesco Distribution is the lesser one, and it is about $100,000 less than the quotation that was withdrawn. Also, we can see the note here that says this number here includes estimated freight. They did provide a freight number, but with delivery expected in 6 months, they cannot guarantee that freight number. So we would like to ask for a 5% contingency on this amount to cover any additional escalation on the freight in 6 months. So now I would like to read the staff recommendation on page 31. That the board authorize the general manager to enter into an agreement with Wesco Distribution to procure 3 600 horsepower VFDs for the Disinfected Tertiary Product Pump and VFDs Rehabilitation Project, CIP 10092, in the amount of $594,138, plus an additional 5% contingency, for a total not to exceed amount of $844.90. And I will take any questions at this time.
Any questions for Director Williams?
I don't have any questions. It sounds pretty good to me. What do you think?
I have a question or two. Director Gray, I think you're the only other director still left with the meeting. Do you have any questions? Have you gone?
Still on.
I'm still
Okay.
here. No, I don't have any questions, but thank you for asking, Director.
So, Joel, I maybe misunderstood you. This is one of these was the one that was impacted by the fire, and you said that there's $100,000 credit. Is that, or did I misunderstand that?
There were 2 quotations. One was approximately $600,000. This one, Wesco Distribution, in front of you. And the other quotation was about $700,000. And they withdrew their quotation last Friday. So we removed it from this memo, and we are presenting the, I'm sorry.
Okay.
If I may address your question, I think the MTC, were you thinking about the MCC that we talked about prior? That's a different project.
Okay. So with the replacement of these VFDs, this is the same project, you know, this goes to the issue of what are we approving or not approving, et cetera. And the design phase projects that we talked about in the lengthy discussion about all of the projects, there's the Disinfectant Tertiary Product Pumps and VFD Rehab. The ultimate cost of that project is $7.7 million. The replacement of the VFDs is probably not going to be anywhere near that. So when we replace the VFDs, are we really agreeing that, and you're going to come back and say, no, but you approved the larger project?
The Looking at the
So-
word,
so-
so
Page 91.
91. Okay. Go ahead, Joel.
So for fiscal year 22-23, we are asking for approximately $1 million. That would cover the $600,000 for procurement of the VFDs. And that would also cover the installation of the VFDs and remaining design support and construction support tasks contracted with Corolla. So that's what we are asking for fiscal year 22-23. At the very beginning of this project in 2017, there was a cost estimate to rehabilitate the entire product water pump system. That includes all the VFDs and also the pumps, all those pumps, those big pumps. We've taken a look at that, and we're thinking maybe not all of those pumps need to be replaced. Maybe they just need rehabilitation work. The current estimate for doing all that work for the life of this project is this $7.5 million or $7.655 million.
So just questions, actually more of a comment, because this is the whole issue that we've been asking about for the last year and a half. What is the approved CIP? The approved CIP in this particular case is the replacement of the VFDs. And I agree, when I saw the price, okay, you're procuring the VFDs, 600, it's not going to cost that much more to do the actual physical installation of the equipment, etc. So I get the $1 million, and that's all going to be in this year's fiscal budget. Although some of this stuff, if you're going to procure it now, we're going to approve this, it's actually going to be paid out of the fiscal 21-22 budget that we're currently in, and not the 22-23 budget.
Well, I think they're saying it's a 6-month fabrication, and so we probably would pay upon receipt, right?
Correct. The payment terms are 100% upon delivery.
Oh, upon delivery. Okay. Because sometimes you pay, I don't know how it's structured, and you don't have the contract here, but sometimes you pay a certain percentage up front, and then you pay the remainder on delivery. In this case, you're structured and it's 100% on delivery.
Great. Yes.
Right. So it's all going to be in next year's fiscal budget, and that's so. In reality, when we approve the fiscal budget, we're already for FY 22-23. We're effectively committing in FY 21-22 to at least one capital project.
One more.
Well, one that's here, the Disinfectant Tertiary Product Pump and VFD Rehab. It's on page 91.
10092.
And that project, and that's why I bring it up, because this is the issue that we always have, is what have we approved? And then you come back, oh, you approved that when you, well, what we're approving is the replacement of the VFDs. That's all we're approving. We're not approving the greater project that's a $7.5 million project.
Correct.
It's a recurring issue, at least for me, of what did we approve, when did we approve it, etc., and not to have things come back and said, oh, that was approved, or that was budgeted for, because our budget is a big pot of money, and there's no line items, which I would like to see, and you're going to hear me repeat that statement over and over and over again, and I've said it in the past, and I will continue to say it.
Easy fix.
Okay? All right, with that, I think we'll go ahead and move this forward for consideration by the board.
I concur.
Okay. But that's the only CIP we're approving. We're not approving the $7.5 million.
That's clear.
Okay, I can't believe we're still here.
Can't?
No, I really didn't expect to be here this long.
We still have a quorum.
What?
We still have a quorum.
So, yeah.
Yes, I still have a quorum.
Yep.
Okay, we have several more items still left on our agenda that we do need to take care of. And two items, item 5E and 5F, have to do with on-call agreements for engineering services and construction management services. I don't think that on-call agreements are critical and that this can be deferred.
Straight to the board meeting?
No, deferred to next month.
Oh.
I'd like to hear a response from our executive manager of engineering and operations on that.
We could do, go ahead, Wendell.
We could defer them till next month. The current agreements expired June 30th.
And the pricing that's been provided will hold for that later hearing?
Yes, it's the recommendation is a 3-year contract.
These are basically to be negotiated on work orders.
Correct.
So whether you have the on-call contractors now or later, doesn't mean anything. Doesn't matter.
We can bring it back next
Back in 3 months for that matter.
I would be pushing it, but
Well, pushing it because you don't have somebody on contract to call up and say, hey, I need to negotiate something. And that's all you can do. But it could wait. Having on-call firms is not critical, in my opinion. So thank you for saying it can wait. All right, so that moves us to the last item, which is the agreement with Chris Home Consulting.
Excuse me, Chairman. So we're tabling.
We're tabling 5E and 5F.
Thank you.
For EDO, next month,
For
EDO committee.
next month, E and O meeting. Correct. It's an item still to be discussed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So approval of the agreement with Chris Home Consulting for strategic consulting services.
Okay.
Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, Chair Alvarez, and I'm happy to report to the board on this recommendation personally. And so you'll find the staff report on page 64 of your packet. And essentially, this particular recommendation to bring on board Chris Helm Consulting relates specifically to some of the areas of interest that you expressed in your earlier remarks, Director Alvarez, as it relates to the future positioning of the district relative to how we might utilize our recycled water facilities at Sea Little and our infrastructure to better supply regional recycled water for indirect potable reuse purposes, and if the opportunity matures, direct potable reuse. And so having said that, this particular service that would be provided would be in the area of strategic services, strategic planning, developing our partnership relationships with the LA Department of Water and Power, LA Sanitation, Metropolitan Water District, Water Replenishment District, in a manner that could best leverage all of our infrastructure to accomplish the type of goals that I think we are all interested in. Those relationships, I think, are in the early stages of being formulated, but I think that Chris Helm in particular is well positioned to aid and support our positioning in those discussions with our partners. Chris Helm has extensive experience working specifically with West Basin on the very facilities that we currently own and operate. He also has extensive experience working with Water Replenishment District, with LA Department of Water and Power as a consultant, with Metropolitan Water District as an employee, and has entered into private practice and has been working with a number of clients in these type of areas. Mr. Helm also has been instrumental in establishing agreements with the partners who we work with today, the refineries who receive the product water that we deliver. And so I am confident that he has the insights and the skill set to bring to bear in the type of work that we need to do going forward. So having said that, the scope of this particular agreement is on a time and material basis. It's a part-time support. We're estimating about 50 hours per month, and for a contract amount not to exceed $150,000. I could read the recommendation straight away, but I think I'll pause and take any questions you may have. And by the way, we do also have Mr. Helm online. And so if there is a question that you would like to pose directly to Mr. Helm, he can entertain those as well.
Mr. Helm will be reporting directly to you, I'm assuming.
That's exactly right.
So you will be responsible for his hourly work.
That's exactly right.
And you feel that you need this in order for you to meet your goals in meeting the board's goals.
You said it very well, that we're trying to meet the board's goals to re-envision the way West Basin operates in conjunction with its partners. And Mr. Helm is very well positioned to assist our strategy, to assist our positioning, and to foster the kind of conversations with our partners that would lead us to a productive outcome.
So you will be, he'll be reporting directly to you.
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you.
Director Gray, do you have any comments on this item? She's still on?
She's still on, yes.
On this particular item, Chris is being brought on basically as your consultant and advisor.
That's correct.
And to reposition the district.
That's correct.
Okay, that's all to the good. Hopefully we will have much better contracts next time around.
No comment. Well, let me comment. I mean, our goal is to position ourselves both in the near term and the long term in a way that is complementary.
Yes. I do know Chris. How you doing, Chris, wherever you are? Chris did work for the district a long time ago.
Hello.
Director Gray, did you have a comment there?
I'm sorry, Director Alvarez. I had to get off the phone and then I just got back on. I thought you had called for comment. Sorry.
No, if you have a comment, go ahead, or a question.
No, are we at the end of the meeting or?
Well, we're still on one last item. This will be the last item, then we'll wrap up the meeting.
All right, I'll try to stay on as long as I can. All right, thank you.
So, a lot of these things are from the long ago past, and they do need to be repositioned. And Chris is familiar with all of these agencies and so on, and hopefully we'll be able to facilitate and grease the skids, if you will, and trying to move forward and repositioning the district. In terms of deliverables, there are no real deliverables here.
Not specified in the scope of services that have been proposed, but as I engage Chris in these efforts, we will define what specifically needs to be done from task to task, from period to period.
I'm fine with that because I understand the nature of the advisory services. And so I just want to clarify so that somebody doesn't come back later and say, well, what's the deliverable? There may be, or there may not be some kind of memorandum to you. There may or may not be some kind of a white paper, but there is no specific deliverables contemplated. no required as part of the agreement, just so that everybody understands.
I would say that's a fair understanding.
But
Go ahead.
you can still have a reportable output monthly.
Certainly, progress reports would accompany the invoicing, so
Right.
we have transparency as to services that have been provided, results that have been achieved for the hours that have been
Hours that-
expended.
Just if you
So
can give
kind
us-
of a three-way match is the way I see it. Services provided, services received, payment being,
I'm okay. I mean, typically what I would expect is kind of like the attorney, you know, day, activity worked on, and
Yeah.
a number of hours, nothing. I'm just going to, earlier I had a comment about, well, what's the deliverable? And I said, there won't be none in terms of what people understand as a classic deliverable. So I just want to let everybody know that.
I think that's a fair characterization.
So with that, the only other question is this really needed for a year, or is 6 months going to be sufficient?
This effort is going to take time. The partnerships that we have with the city and with potentially with Metropolitan and with Water Replenishment District did not evolve overnight, and they won't change overnight. And so the conversation that Mr. Helm and I had about what's necessary to get us going will likely take more than 6 months. Having said that, we can gauge the progress and moderate how we utilize these services based on what we see in terms of the productivity and the results thereof.
Okay, I'm good with that. I'm just going to extend the challenge because you know that I like to get things done. I think 6 months to get an agreement in would be
That's fantastic outcome.
not fantastic, would be the target. Chris can rise to the occasion.
Okay, well, I appreciate that challenge, and we will talk internally about that challenge and design a process that can be supported, that can support that outcome.
Otherwise, it's fine. You ready to move this forward?
I am.
I am too.
Okay, fantastic.
Congratulations, Chris.
Okay, so with that, I'll read the recommendation for formality that the board authorize the general manager to enter into an agreement with Chris Helm Consulting for strategic consulting services for a contract amount not to exceed $150,000. All right, so moved, so approved.
Okay, we're going to skip the rest of the items that we have for under 6A, under item 6, the information calendar. There's no closed session today, so that brings us to director's comments and future agenda items. Do we have any director's comments?
I have none, thank you.
Director Gray, do you have any director's comments? Okay, I will add none so that we can then move on to the next item, which is adjournment. And let it be known that it is 7:30, and we've been here an awful long time. But thank you very much for your patience.
37:35.
What's that?
It says 7:35.
7:35, you're right. I just kind of glanced up.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I want to say thank you to our engineering staff and all that has been presented today. I think we did an outstanding job with very substantive information in a quick response to all of the questions that were posed today, and I want to thank my staff for doing so. Okay,